Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of the UKSimRacing Community Sunday GT3 Championship Season 17 as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing and proudly hosted by none other than SimRacing International. That's right, we are back for another round, and after our absolutely brilliant, albeit tricky season opener in Germany last time out at the Sachsenring, we have made our way all the way to the USA for the Daytona International Speedway. But as our drivers get ready to go racing today, there's only one anthem we can open up with, of course, and that is, of course, the classic Daytona USA theme of Daytona. And I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'm going to have no vocal cords before this broadcast has even got truly underway. Because indeed, as our drivers get set to take on the 3.56 mile circuit, well, it is a circuit like no other when it brings fans and drivers to its asphalt year in, year out. Home to the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, having hosted it now and since 1966, and therefore making its way into its 60th year as of this year, well, our drivers will be looking to try and entrench and etch their names into the history books at this legendary circuit. With a variety of 12 corners that marry together the wide, open oval with, of course, a very tricky infield section made up of multiple hairpins, there's nothing quite like taking a win at Daytona. And in this round, well, it may be quite nothing like this round, because on the way is a lot of rain from what I'm hearing in at the moment. We could be looking at quite biblical conditions. And indeed, the weather forecast does not lie. Unfortunately, we can't quite present it on screen at the moment, but what we can definitely show to you is the fact it is very cloudy around here. I think the weather chart in the top right corner of your screen doesn't quite explain how cloudy it is, and while we do have a relatively moderate ambient temperature, 24 degrees centigrade in the air, translating to 31 degrees centigrade out on track, but a very high humidity, 72%, and quite a bit of wind as well. So add it all up, this could definitely be a round whereby whilst it's dry right now, should that rain come onto the Daytona circuit here in Florida, it could certainly mix things up. But where are my manners? Let me welcome you to this post-round broadcast for your viewing pleasure as you tune in tonight as it premieres on the SimRacing International YouTube channel. Indeed, the only source for all this entertainment is on youtube.com, and search for SimRacing International and you can catch it all there. And well, when we say this is a post-round broadcast, this is a recorded broadcast of all the racing which occurred as of yesterday on Sunday the 18th of January 2026, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live today on this Monday the 19th of January. What that means is, in the commentary booth, we do not know what has unfolded, whether it be in the qualifying session that's currently ongoing in the background, nor alternatively in the upcoming race, and therefore it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls tuning in at home. And if you do happen to know the outcome, well, the result, don't put it in the chat because of the simple reason we don't want to put spoilers out there for our guys and girls tuning in at home for whom this is their first time seeing it as it all unfolds, and therefore we'll keep it as close as possible to that raw viewing experience for you. But as we make our way into this round, in the content booth you have myself as always, my name is Paul Walsh, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action as it unfolds. But as we head into round 2 of the championship, well, we need to do a bit of a recap of what's unfolded thus far. So, of course, we have made our way then to round number 2. 2 weeks ago, we opened up with our pre-season test on the 4th of January at the Adelaide Street Circuit on Australia. There, we only saw half the field make their way to the infamous street circuit, but after which, then we opened up proceedings formally on the 11th of January, and last time out, we were at the Sachsenring. Now, in Germany, we got to see 3 very different stories. In the elite class, it was Beta Frost combination of William Arneson and Henrik Reed-Strand, who absolutely led the way and made it a perfect 1-2 for the team by a sizable margin over their rivals, with Arneson in the end leading home that 1-2, with Strand not quite able to get close enough to his teammate, albeit they were never more than 3 to 4 seconds apart. As for the pro class, where it was Kyle Roy who got off to a winning start, given the fact it was a close run battle for pole position between himself and Hendrik Zilke, but in the end he was able to make sure that Zilke was relegated to fighting for second, as Roy was gradually able to walk away with that lead. As for the interclass, well, what we got to see there was a race full of surprise and late twists, spins aplenty for winners. Indeed, the win exchanged hands more time than any other class that we've seen in the last couple of seasons, but it was Craig Hewlett avoided all the drama and took the lead in the end and never looked back, whereas other drivers meanwhile had an absolute nightmare, perhaps none more so than qualifying for Andrew Montine, who had a 7th place in qualifying but somehow found a way to fight his way through to 2nd place, and it was a well-driven race from him. But Daytona is our host circuit today, and it's a very different different style of circuit before you consider the mixed weather conditions that we are expecting. Reason being, of course, last time out we were at a very tight and twisty circuit with very little room for overtakes unless it's on the back straight. Meanwhile, here at Daytona, it's the complete opposite. Plenty of room to go for overtakes, predominantly, of course, on the oval, but also in the infield if you're feeling plucky enough to dive up the inside. And add to it all, it does mean that strategy is going to be absolutely key here, not just in terms of when you come into the pits to try and leapfrog your opponents, but also siphoning some fuel saving in the slipstream of another car, and also knowing when's the right time to attack versus when's the right time to save the tyres. But as I try to make the way into this round, and after this round we'll head to Portugal, well, let's talk a little bit more in detail about our host circuit. Here's, of course, the road course layout of Daytona. It has stood the test of time. It has been around for some time, the best part of a couple of decades. The circuit itself located within the city limits of Daytona Beach in Volusia County of the US state of Florida. 3.56 miles, or if you prefer kilometers, 5.72 of those. However, either way, the corners stay the same. 12 quarters, and, well, an absolutely brilliant application of both the oval, of which it does use 90% of the circuit's oval layouts, the tri-oval, which is more infamous for NASCAR, of course, and then you do have that infield section absolutely brimming with hairpins, starting at turn number 1 and ending at turn number 7, while drivers will come in and come out of the infield as quick as that. But of course, we do need to say a big thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but the absolutely fantastic track maps that come with it and enable us to really talk about these circuits and help bring them to life. However, the one thing is also notable, and perhaps we haven't talked about, is the fact that on the back section, or the flat back of the oval, you do of course have the Le Mans chicane, previously known as the bus stop, but I do believe its official name now as of 2025 has become the Le Mans chicane at turns 9, 10 and 11, and there we'll find that all of our drivers' speed down that back section will suddenly be curbed as they'll need to trail brake the way into the very quick left-right, right-left before return to full throttle and blasting their way through the final oval bank in the turn number 12 to complete lap and do it all over again. On that final lap, of course, have the drag race to the finish line. And indeed, there's never quite going to be a good time to get on that slipstream other than at the very end of the race, and that's why we can always expect a thriller. But we haven't quite got any standings to walk you through today, understandably, given we are into round number 2. We'll be showing you the championship standings from round number 3 onwards, but we can do a bit more recapping as we head back to circuit side. So as we do, at least for now, it would seem that most of the drivers are out there. And in fact, the conditions are not looking too bad. As soon as I open my mouth, however, there's some rain slightly on camera. So we started off with a dry practice and a dry qualifying session. What this may mean for the remaining 20 minutes of this qualifying session or so is that actually nobody's really able to improve at this point onwards. However, we will see what our drivers are able to do. I can imagine that slicks are currently on the cars and they will be trying to make sure they don't lose any tyre temperature where they can. Hayden Miller being one of our drivers, of course, in the elite class, he makes his way around. And we should point out that the Phoenix Racing drivers, they were incorrectly labelled as blue and red drivers last time out. They all are actually part of one team for the purposes of this championship on the Sundays. As for our GT3 championship on the Thursdays, that's where you have your Phoenix Racing red and blue teams. And one driver who we didn't actually show was in the team was none other than Shane Cotton. He is the third member of the team on this grid for what is the Sunday series. But coming to the man who's on the screen right now, Hayden Miller, well, he had a bit of a challenging time last time out at what was the Sachsenring circuit, where things didn't quite click together the way he wanted them to, unfortunately, and he'll be hoping he can bounce back today, as that was a spin for a driver just behind him there, getting quite wrong how they've towed to the pits, and I can imagine that they will be back out there as quickly as they can, as these wet conditions now definitely testing the fortitude of our drivers, albeit it does mean that at this point in time, I would imagine we're not going to be seeing much more improvement from anybody else out there, and I think it's going to be more about acclimatising to these conditions more than anything else. So the rain doesn't look too bad at the moment, but I get the feeling those clouds, I look out my content booth window, are getting darker and darker, and the ambient lighting has gone down to the effect that they're already turning on their headlights. Now, if we do end up going towards night time, of course, one of the unique quirks about this Daytona circuit, if you want a little bit of trivia that you can always impress your motorsport family and friends or colleagues who are interested in motorsport about, is the fact that when racing does occur at Daytona, particularly for the 24 hours of Daytona, the floodlight system around here, if you ever watch a NASCAR race, you'll notice it's almost as if the race is in daylight, given how strong the floodlights are. However, for the purposes of the 24-hour race, those floodlights are actually reduced to only what I believe, I can't remember the percentage off by heart, it's either 75% or I think it's actually 25% of their normal intensity. And the reason behind that is, it's to ensure that nighttime is actually in effect. If they were to have the floodlights at the 400% that you do see for NASCAR, you wouldn't actually have a nighttime race. You would be able to see just as well as you would in daylight. So that's why they have to dim the floodlights to make sure there is a nighttime period in the race when it does happen. And of course, happening at the end of January. It's happening in what is a weekend's time. And we look forward to seeing that, as we don't look forward to seeing Casper Ryder slide loose. Unfortunately, make his way to the barrier there. And, well, easy mistake to make coming through the bus stop chicane. And once Ross Young goes deep, well, the Dexterous Motorsports driver, he'll be heading on around. The man who finished in second in the end last time out in the Pro class. Well, what a story it was for Young, in the fact they missed out on second place in qualifying for Hendrik Zilka by a very small margin, and he had a lot more pace in qualifying than his laps would suggest. Indeed, his race pace was absolutely terrific, and in the end he was able to get ahead of Hendrik Zilka and able to pull away quite quickly, and he proved himself to be the equal of Kyle Roy, and it really was a story at the Sachsenring whereby all the jigsaw pieces fell into place for the Pro winner of Roy. Although I don't believe he's here today. I think he's, well, no, he is here. I do correct myself straight away. There is his car parked up. He's decided just to stay in the pits alongside his teammate. And, well, as he sat there waiting right now, everything fell into place for the Corvette driver. From the point of qualifying, we put an absolutely brilliant pole lap together to the fact that whilst he had a lot of quicker rivals behind him, nobody could get past each other because of the long queue of cars that built. And that was the thing the Sachsenring was all about. Put yourself in pole and then just walk away with the lead of the race if you can. As we look to Darren Sharples, meanwhile, as he makes one around, and he definitely had a bit of a difficult debut in Germany, and he'll be hoping for a lot more here today. But if we said earlier about the fact there was a 1-2 in the elite class for what was the team Beta Frost of William Arneson and Henrik Strand, then who was your third place finisher in that one? Well, it's your current oval pole sitter on a 44.804. It's none other than Andrea Miato. Now, Miato's race was quite the exciting one because, of course, he was battling with Hayden Miller for third place all the way through the race. The two were literally inseparable. They were joined from the bumpers. However, midway through the race, Hayden Miller had a very unfortunate technical retirement to the car. The engine blew, and in the end, well, he had to park up on the sidelines as Miato was given the opportunity to essentially walk to the finish line with that third place, albeit he didn't back off the pace. He did have plenty of hungry rivals still behind him by the best part of 6-7 seconds, but that's how it ended. And I think Miato was a bit gutted in the end, and we were gutted here in the commentary booth. We did not get to see their battle run all the way to the finish because it was definitely a very close fought battle, and in the end it was going to be a very intriguing ending as to which of the V8s would have become superior. Would it have been the German V8 in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage Evo, or was it going to be the 5.5 litre V8 in the Corvette Z06? Well, it's the Aston Martin that gained the upper hand in the end on reliability, but here today it could be very different, although Miato being the fastest driver here in this qualifying session, and that's before the rain arrived, it should be pointed out. He set that time of 44.804. Well, of course, this circuit, a very different one, very different balance of performance here, not necessarily because of the Daytona 24-hour endurance balance of performance, which we have just seen over the course of this weekend due to the iRacing official 24 Hours of Daytona, which has its own unique balance of performance. We are not running that. We are running the default balance of performance that you would see in any iRacing official GT3 series, and that's why you're not necessarily going to see these machines dominate, because they did dominate, as I'm to understand it, in the Daytona 24-hour event, the Porsche 992.2 GT3, of course. But as Nuno Vinagre makes his way out, the Portuguese driver right now on the grid, and I'm very happy to see him there, and flying the Portuguese colours on his car there. Definitely a lovely livery in honour of his home country, I do believe. We look forward to seeing what he's going to be able to do here today, because he's currently looking quite quick as he follows a couple of his peers on around, but at this point it's definitely not going any quicker. Everyone right now has dropped into what is the very high 140s, if not started to go into the low 150s. So therefore, it does seem at the moment at least this is all a familiarisation session for the remainder of qualifying. And again, that's always a good thing, and as our drivers get more and more familiar with these conditions, well, it means it's going to generate what will be a very exciting wet weather race, albeit do hope we do see the stopping of the rain at some point, although it seems like it's falling at some points and not at others. So perhaps we are going to have a bit of a mixture, and as soon as I say that, then the rain appears on camera, and then it does not. Well, the rain's going to keep us guessing. We're all going to be kept absolutely guessing. But as we've been talking a little bit about the elite class, well, let's talk about the interclass then. Craig Hewlett, your winner last time out. And, well, what a win it was for him. He managed to avoid all the opening lap drama, he took the lead, and he never really looked back after that, other than to see what the gap was. And a couple of drivers slide there in towards turn number 7, and that is the Manish machine of 196 from UKSimRacing Manish. believe that's been piloted by none other today than what is, well, in fact, I can't even get a door number here at the moment, as our time tower has decided to fall victim to a little bit of weather in the Conte booth. I do believe that's Nathan Anstis' car. It's making its way around and in as it just has updated itself. Don't worry, don't adjust your TV set. It's still working on your end. It's just here, unfortunately, some weather has got into the electronics here, and we are just trying to sort that out. But as Hewlett makes his way through, well, right now he definitely was the man to beat last time out at the Sachsenring, and here today he may just be that man again, albeit he does have a few other drivers who are a little bit quicker than him in qualifying, including the man who was the runner-up, Andrew Montine, in his McLaren 1020S Evo. And, well, as we mentioned earlier, he had that nightmare qualifying session where he couldn't get the lap time he wanted, but as soon as he went into the race, well, he completely went from race pace in terms of trying to charge to strategic pace, and he used it to his advantage, plus also he put in a very good late stint, and he suddenly found himself in second place at the very end. As the man who finished in third place, well, he definitely was pushing hard, and it was none other than Tom Wheeler in his Ford Mustang, who in the end was very happy with his qualifying position. However, it was in the race where we got to see some very fine driving from this man, who got caught up in the Sean Connor train, with Sean Connor putting together one of the longest trains I've ever seen in motorsport, whether simulated or real. In fact, the Truly train, the younger Truly train, the infamous one from Formula 1, definitely would have had a rival in what Sean Connor was able to do, whereby despite missing his front bumper with some significant damage to the car, was able to keep it on the road and keep the best part of 20 cars stuck behind him. It really led to a big split in the field at a short circuit, whereby the leaders in the end, the top 15 in particular, all came up to lap that train gradually. So it did lead to a bit of pandemonium, although respect and credit where it's due to our drivers, they all handled it very well. Nobody got too feisty in that train, and also the lead lappers, they did find the blue flags were respected quite well, as best as they could be, really, and that was something that all the stewards were very pleased to see, and they commended everyone for, was the fact that the racing, despite the fact it was very cool, goodness me, as that's a bit of a moment to the wall there for our Audi R8 driver of Max Wheeler. What I was going to say is, despite the fact that many drivers could have been very hot-headed in such circumstances, nobody was, and everybody kept it together, which is what we love to see. And Tom Wheeler in the end was the one who was able to clear his way through the train, and he did seem very comfortable. Put him around a load of drivers, and the Ford Mustang driver Wheeler definitely seemed to feel much more comfortable compared to when he was on an empty circuit qualifying. Not that he did find any empty circuit out there, of course, because there were so many cars out there all looking for space, which when you did have a circuit just over 2 miles with 50 cars in it, you do the quick mathematics, and what you find is that's 0.4 miles per car on approximation. Not much space whatsoever. But as our driver makes his way around right now, Wheeler and indeed many, well, they're all still getting themselves clocked in. And in fact, let's dial ourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, for an on-board lap. We're going to jump on board with the Audi R8 Evo 2 of none other than Max Wheeler, as he can barely see anything, but we'll try and bring you the lap. So making his way into the braking zone for turn 1, braking from very far back here, from about 300 metres before the apex, and down to second gear, and back on the throttle immediately, battling there with a little bit of the traction control system through the kinks of 2 and 3, the chicane, lets the car lift off the throttle, and now onto the brakes into the horseshoe hairpin. Down all the way to second gear, won't dare touch first gear here due to the fear of rear wheel spin. As he makes his way out, now it's up towards the kink of turn number 5. Here about unsighted with the spray of both cars, and well, Wheeler at this point, oh goodness me, as that's a little bit of an altercation there between what will be at the Ford Mustang in front. They all run wide there, and well, Wheeler right now just surviving all this as he has to dive up the inside in towards turn number 6. But as he does so, a very good choice there from Wheeler, and keep in mind as well the fact that when you are in the wet and not necessarily the racing line anymore, you can choose different lines. But onto the brakes into turn 7 he goes, as we do see the rejoining number 35 for Mustang there, make its way right in front, and Wheeler will be grateful for that. That's going to give him a tow all the way around. That's Nick Parks, who took a trip to the grass and has brought himself back on. And as Wheeler makes his way now up onto the oval bank into turn number 8, it's flat out all the way along here as the wipers will continue to do their hard work. Well, he'll get himself set now to come over to the right-hand side very gradually to get ready for the bus stop chicane. Maybe called Le Mans, but we're going to keep referring it to as bus stop because it's force of habit. And as they make their way down onto the brakes here, we'll brake in at about what will be 400 metres before the corner, down to third gear, tip-toeing his way through, takes as much curb as he dares to do so. Recently refurbished and reformatted curbs for 2026. They are much higher, and it also means the bus stop chicane now is a lot more slowing in terms of its nature compared to the previous iterations where you could blast your way through it. Not so anymore. But as Wheeler tucks back into tow, going through turn number 12, he's going to go flat out all the way to the finish here. And Being close behind that Ford Mustang, gets so close, he's going to bump draft it along, and that helps him avoid the spray that's coming up there. And I do apologise if that is giving it a bit of an epileptic stroll effect for anyone. But as they make their way down towards turn number 1, well, that's the on-board lap of the Daytona road course, is brought to you by none other than what is Max Wheeler in some absolutely abhorrent conditions. And in fact, it does seem as though that rain, well, when it stops, it does stop for a very brief breather, but beyond that, it is getting more and more inclement. And well, understandably at the moment, I get the feeling that for a lot of our drivers right now, this is going to be a qualifying session whereby they go out there just to figure out what the conditions are like, but otherwise stay in the pits and just wait very patiently. But that's what happens, of course, when you do have these extended qualifying sessions. You do have some situations, particularly when it's mixed weather conditions, or even when we do have conditions which are not expecting any rain, even when it's just brilliant sunshine. You can expect, of course, that in some circumstances that the circuit will offer the best possible times either early on in the session or late on in the session, and that's all part of the extended qualifying session. That's why we switched to it for this season, because it offers something a bit different, which is sometimes you need to pick the exact right time to get out there and get a good lap together. The only problem is when you do have the company of a grand total of what is 45 other cars at the same circuit, and they all go out onto it whenever they want, everyone's going to be looking for the exact right time. So sometimes it's better to get in a lap early, albeit here today it was definitely the right idea to get in a lap early, and at the moment we are never recreating the 44s and 45s at the top times, not in these conditions. The best you're going to be able to see as you're looking at your third place man of Henrik Reed's Strand at the moment, well, the best you'll see is just shy of 2 minutes. So 1 minute 59.09 he's previously set, and that's what he's going to try and push towards. But still, it's one thing to qualify well in the race. I suspect this could be a bit of a race about survival for everybody. And, well, I have a lot of faith in all of our drivers, to be fair. They'll do their best to avoid any chaos and carnage on the open lap. But we will see what exactly happens. It only takes one driver to get it wrong, and then suddenly they could fall like a pack of dominoes. But then again, all these drivers, to be fair, if they were able to survive the Sachsenring without too much bother, I suspect a spot of rain, albeit I think that's a bit of an understatement, I think they will be able to survive the conditions here at Daytona as best as they can. But we also do look to the pit lane, and here is your Lamborghini Huracan that decides to hide itself from our cameras. Well, he's off in the distance there. You'll see him as the number 2 car from what is the first car in the picture of Pietro Antonio Pasquarello, and right now he's currently sat there, I think, happy with the job he's done. He'll be lined up behind his teammate of Andrea Miato. And well, we look forward to seeing what those two will be able to do from the front row of the grid. But in terms of what is your pro class, well, the man who's put it on what is very likely to be pole position is Bruno Patica, and he's in the old dudes in cars Porsche. And his last time out, we had a solid showing at what was the Sachsenring. Seemed to enjoy himself out there. Indeed, a lot of our drivers really did enjoy it. It was a race that, despite the fact that overtaking was very much relegated to the back end of the circuit, it added a little bit of a do or die aspect to the racing, whereby essentially you had drivers who had to be quite forceful with moves, albeit the Sachsenring is a circuit that doesn't offer that. Now, of course, for Patica, it was 11th place in class that he qualified, and 9th he finished in the race in his class, although I think the long train he got caught up in definitely did cause him to not be able to progress as much as he wanted to. Now, as for the man who calls the big old train, well, here is Shane Connor, as he makes his way along there in the Connor Bros Raybrig NSX. As he makes his way around the Acura machine there. I was going to call it a Honda, but let's go with its official title in IMSA regulations, which is the Acura, in reference to the American division of Honda. And keep in mind, of course, the Gen 2 Honda NSX, or Acura NSX, should really be called the Acura NXS because of the fact it was developed primarily by the American arm, or Acura. It still holds the Honda badge. If you were to try and get your hands on one of these in, say, Japan or the United Kingdom or Europe, it would be under a Honda badge. However, in the US of A, it definitely very much has the Acura badge, whereas the original NSX, the infamous car that really kicked off what was the supercar war of the 90s, or the very first affordable supercar as it was known, well, we definitely saw there what was our time tower disappears and then reappears. Apologies for that, not quite sure what happened there. Our time tower just deciding to have a bit of a glitch. Well, it was one of those situations whereby that car kicked off the train, but this one has really kicked off what is quote-unquote the affordable hypercar, whereby when it was teased in 2012, the whole theme of the car was that with its 3.5 litre V6 engine, plus also its 2 hybrid batteries driving the front wheels and the one in the rear driving the rear wheels, that essentially it would be a car that could achieve sub 4 second 0 to 60 times. However, unlike other cars of the era that could do it, that would cost you the best part of what would be at least £250,000 or £500,000, you could go to your local Honda dealer or Acura dealer, not that you would, mind you, and well, I'll tell you a little bit more about why shortly, particularly in the United Kingdom, but you would go to your seller for the car and you would be able to get your hands on one for what was actually not a terrible price for the machine available of approximately £110,000. If you spec options into it, you'd be paying £120,000, which again, do keep in mind, I caveat it here with the idea that with that Acura, of course, you are buying into a hypercar, whereas a lot of the other equivalents, they will cost at least double, if not triple that. The only thing was, of course, you couldn't get your hands on one of them because in the United Kingdom, for example, there were only 2 places in the UK that would sell them to you. They were both based in London, and to get the car serviced, you had to go take them to London. You couldn't get them serviced anywhere else because of the specialist equipment. And one of the very unique things about this car is the fact, much like, say, all the Nissan GTRs, many of course you'll know the infamous Godzilla machine, the R35, well, each of those were uniquely handcrafted made, particularly their engines. As the Acura, each one has a unique ID, as that's going to be a unique spin there, but he catches it very well for Shane Connor, and well, he decides to park up and make his way back to the pit lane. But each Acura NSX or Honda NSX that sold had a unique ID, and all the parts in it were unique to that car. So therefore, when you take the car for a service or for repair work, you have to give the ID chip to the Honda or Acura service centre, and they will then go through the entire history of that unique car and make sure the parts fit exactly to that car with its own design parameters. Of course, built to a template, however, each one was slightly unique. But that's that. Oh my good lord, as that's to be Rob Windsor taking a big slide into the pit lane, and well, I don't think he realised exactly where the pit entry line was and how quick he could approach it. But he makes way up into the jacks, but that's definitely going to be a black flag when he leaves the pit lane for unsafe entry. And well, as he decides to get out the car, we look to Daniel Pays, as we definitely see the BMW M4 Evo driver right now, just tiptoeing his way on around. But coming back to the theme here, well, what can we expect in the wet then? We're qualifying that with only 1.5 minutes to go, and what we can expect is the fact that if the conditions stay as they... Oh my good lord, as that's going to be Daniel Pays into the brick wall there of the tyre barriers. And well, that was a big slide loose very quickly at turn number 7. But what we can expect here is that the way they've lined up has been based, I think, on dry times. As we do see there, Neville Harris taking a trip to the weeds. A very gradual rallycross line here, to be fair. And that grass is quite smooth. It's not undulating, so he won't pick up too much suspension damage there as he decides to cut his way through the inner infield section. As he brings his way back onto the road, well, the thing with Neville Harris right now and deal to everybody, I think they're all going to think to themselves, right, survive lap 1, and then after that, see where you come through to next. Because over 60 minutes, if the rain keeps coming, or if the circuit dries up, this circuit is going to evolve very gradually, but that evolution could very much spark off what will be changes afoot in the field. So therefore, I think qualifying right now, yes, it dictates where you start in the relative order, and Andrea Miato will be very, very grateful to be starting on pole position. But once we get green flag racing, anything can happen here at Daytona, given how wet it is. And I suspect for these conditions, you would normally see a race or qualifying session red flag. But unfortunately, we can't red flag in iRacing. What we can do instead is see how our drivers get on in conditions that are perhaps no longer raced in, or indeed come very close to cancelling the racing. Not that I'm saying it should be red flagged, of course. This is going to be a real test for our drivers here, and it will come down to who's the bravest of the bunch, but also who is perhaps the most calm, cool, and consistent. As qualifying comes to a close, ladies and gentlemen, and well, it's going to be Andrea Miata on pole position. Over in Elite, Bruno Batica will take the Pro pole in 5th place. And as for into pole position, well, he's currently in the pit lane. It's Robin Aston in the end, who is going to be taking that 11th place overall. So well done to them, but they will all be mindful, as everybody will be, that how they line up on this grid today may have no bearing on how the race ends comes to the end of the 60 minutes. But as our driver's cooling down, Alexander Vingmark here, he's definitely one of the victims of qualifying, who in the end has only been able to get himself into 38th after what was quite an impressive qualifying session from him at the Sachsenring. But I suspect also several drivers who've not set times, including James Connolly, Richard Jones, David Young and Shane Connor, all intriguingly in the interclass. I think those that start at the back have got just as much chance of winning this race as those that start at the very front. But that's what the wet weather does. It completely takes the race, it takes the order and shuffles it all around. And indeed right now it could be just as much a lottery here, although if anybody does win this race, well, it might be on just as much luck as determination. They may want to get a lottery ticket afterwards. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, well, we see our drivers cooling down, and we'll very shortly be making our way into our interluding 5-minute warm-up session. As we do see it. The lovely Ferrari from sim coach Steve Hobbs, well, giving us such an example of how much water's out there right now. And indeed, that is a lot of water that Ferrari 296 is kicking up for the rear spray. And the rain is still coming down. And, well, my goodness me, as I look at my console booth window, the rain is not stopping anytime soon. Yes, we get brief breathers from it, but the clouds over Daytona right now are as thick as they come. And, well, this is definitely going to be a round where I think some would say this is not the round they wanted it to be, but thankfully they do have a drop score in the season as well. But I wonder if a lot of drivers will be considering already in the back of their minds relegating round number 2 of the championship to being a drop score. But that's, of course, one of the big questions, of course. Is it really a drop score, or is it a golden opportunity for you to go to your highest score of the season? And I can tell you that, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that sometimes in the wet, if you just get it right, suddenly you could surprise yourself just how well you can do. Because in these conditions, it really is about driving to the conditions and driving to the level of ability. But that's why they have so many electronics in these cars, the ABS and the traction control, to give them the ability to try and dial into those conditions and not make any mistakes. But make no mistake, as we wait for Steve Hobbs to come to the end of this lap and Neville Harris has just called his way down, well, then we will be heading to the final warm-up before we go onto the grid for round number 2. So with 5 minutes to go before we do go to the grid, well, there you can see in the scenic view right now just how wet or moist it is at the moment. And indeed, if we were on the Top Gear test track, I don't think even they could get away with calling these conditions mildly moist as they used to. And indeed, right now, I think this is wet. Alternatively, we are looking at biblical with regards to how the weather's gone. But still, as all of our drivers either sit in the pits and alternatively make their way out there, well, I think those who go out, they just want to see where the conditions are again. So they'll all be on wet tyres. If anybody goes to slicks here, they're an absolute mad person for doing so. Not that I think anybody would here, or I think some might decide whilst they're waiting down the pit lane, they might be making paper boats and just sailing them down the pits. Indeed, that's one thing. If you ever do watch in real life motorsport and it is conditions which red flag because of how wet it is, sometimes you do see teams decide to put little paper boats together and just have them sail down the pit lane depending on which way the water's flowing. Unfortunately, they can't do it right here right now, but what they can do is they can play with life-size boats, i.e. cars, as we do see Tim Perry there getting a bit aggressive on his out lap. And, well, Perry definitely deciding that he wants to have a bit of fun, and who can blame him for doing so, as I think he's right now really got the bit between his teeth as Tim. We know he's a very consistent driver. We've seen it in our GT3 championships in the past, and we've also seen it in the currently ongoing GTE championship in his BMW M8 GTE. Well, he may not be in the fastest car and he may not be the fastest driver, but he definitely is one of those drivers who is more than the sum of his parts. And, well, he's able to put together some absolute monster performances when he perhaps shouldn't be where he finishes, just simply because he finds a way to fuel save and out-strategize his rivals, or if he doesn't, he suddenly finds a bit of a burst of pace. And he follows some cars around. Well, we look to Alex Brown here, and well, the number 97 driver from Slow and Steady Racing. And remember, they always do support men's mental health. It's okay to talk. You'll see it on the side of the car there. I think they've done a lot of charitable work over the years for Mind. Well, as we do see Brown making his way on around right now. Well, we'll take a look on board here, and this is what he currently sees when he's got no car in front of him. You'll notice, by the way, on the dashboard there on the left-hand side, the car does have a blue background to the gear. That is because the car is in a wet mode, and also wet tyres have been put in the car, but he's also dialed all the electronics to the wet section of the traction control and ABS, of which these cars normally do have somewhere in the region between around 9 to 12 traction control settings, whereby when you do go into that region of around what is 8 through to 11, if I remember correctly, on the Ford Mustang, you will be going into the wet modes. And there are also what is, I believe, throttle maps as well that can be applied to the cars, and they might also change the throttle maps to these. Not everyone does, to be fair. The number one throttle map is the linear throttle map, where essentially the more throttle you apply, the faster the car will try to accelerate or deliver engine power. But sometimes you can go to throttle maps that are much more gentle or curved, where the idea being only when you put your foot fully down does the car take a more aggressive throttle stance. But the idea is when you initially put your foot onto the throttle, the amount of engine power that's delivered to the rear wheels is a lot more gradual, and that way you're able to modulate the throttle more. As we see a car around there, that is none other than what is the Mirror Car machine, making its way all the way around with a bit of a spin. That was Jakob Stofko, who then gets it back together, and he does so in the nick of time. But as they all continue the way around in this practice session, Well, we've got not long very left to go here, with the best part of 2 minutes left on the clock. More stuff go right now. Coming on through us, that's the car off the road there. That's Ross Young, who's decided to reverse his way off of turn number 4. I think a wise move there from Young. And indeed, I think many of the driver right now will be trying to get used to the fact as well, being ready for the unexpected. If they suddenly come through the spray and see a car that's parked right across their road, well, we will see what's going to happen of that, because we don't wish for anybody to have a big old spin. As we look to the other Miracle Group M Academy machine from Scotland of Kyle Roy, currently your Pro Championship leader after the opening round, and well, he's not qualified on pole today, but to be fair, I think he's definitely going to be someone who'll be very eager just to see what it's like. Albeit he's been no stranger to the conditions, given where he hails from, to be fair, and that's not me trying to put an insult on his Scottish heritage. Having spent quite a bit of time in Scotland myself in my earlier years, I can tell you one thing. At certain points, particularly in the Highlands, you'll find rain, you'll find snow and sunshine all in the same day in the winter. As Roy, they're completing, this is the Le Mans chicane. I think that might have been just a little bit of what was unsightedness with the Porsche he was going side by side with at the time. But I think for Roy right now, he will try to just make sure he gets comfortable with these conditions as best as he can. Indeed, there'll be many here, but he used to driving in similar conditions when it's in their actual cars on the road, although I don't think it's in a GT3, to be fair. And right now, like many, they're all brave at it, and well, I don't envy them for braving it out there. And actually, a very, what is not an innocent part of me, quite a sick part of me, actually wonders whether you'd like to do a whole race in these conditions. Well, the good news is, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to find it out very shortly, because in 3, 2, 1, that's our warm-up done. And well, as Alex Brown had taken a very last-minute reaction to avoid a car that was parked up, we take a look to the scenic view, and with it, well, it's time to head to the grid for round number 2. So as our drivers make the way onto the grid, this is held on lineup for our second round of the championship at the swimming pool. Sorry, I mean Daytona International Speedway. It's Andrea Miato who takes pole position for Tartem Restec, both in elite and overall. Head of Pietro Antonio Pasquarello, who joins on that front row. It's an all Tartem Restec 1-2. Then it'll be Henrik Ridstrand who starts third for Beta Frost, ahead of Nuno Vinegra. In fourth place there for the Portuguese driver, ahead of your pro pole sitter of Bruno Batica. Well done to Bruno. That's a brilliant pole lap. Now he's got to follow it up. He'll be joined on that third row by William Arneson, the current Elite Championship leader. Behind the Beta Frost driver will be Hayden Miller for Phoenix Racing and Axis Sport Z and Matthew Croft. Then we have Harvey Wheeler starting ninth for Freewheeler Racing by Phoenix, ahead of Miracle Group M Esports' Jakob Stofko. And outside that top 10, we then have your Interpole sitter of Robin Aston, who starts in 11th for GPX SimSport Onyx, and he will be in the company of none other than Max Wheeler for Freewheeler Racing by Phoenix. Then we have on row number 7, Robin Pownier for SimCoach, ahead of Reece Saunders, with the Altitude 3M Esports driver starting there, knowing he's got some progress to make today after a brilliant qualifying session at the Sachsenring. Here it hasn't quite worked out. He'll then have behind him, starting on the 8th row of the grid, Darren Sharples in 15th place for third of the pros, Old Dudes in Cars. And then we do have Andrew Montine at 16th there for Axis Sport Z, third of your Inter drivers. Harry Shaw, he begins the day in 17th place for Iron Apex Esports, looking to move forward as quickly as he can. Head of Tim Perry for Altitude 3M Esports. And then completing your top 20, it's Richard Simnell, the defending elite champion for DCW Racing, ahead of Casper Rotner for Old Dudes in Cars. Outside that top 20 then, on what is 21st, it will be Nathan Anstis for UKSimRacing Manish, putting it together in qualifying to a degree, ahead of Craig Hewlett, the Inter winner from last time out. The Axis Sport Y machine will be followed up by Connor Broses, none other than Sean Connor. And then we do have Kyle Roy and his company on that 12th row for Miracle Group M Academy. There'll then be Steve Hobbs, who starts 25th for SimCoach, ahead of DXT Motorsports' Ross Young. And then behind the Scotsman, it's going to be a theme here, is it not? Where we have Scots on the right, and then Britons or Englishmen on the left, because we then do have none other than Martin Ken, who starts 27th for DXT Motorsports, head of Grant Miller for Phoenix Racing. And then it will be the Briton of Nick Parks, the privateer, ahead of fellow privateer there of none other than Neville Harris, to complete your top 30. Outside that top 30, we then do have Daniel Page, who starts 31st for Old Dudes in Cars, ahead of none other than Tom Wheeler, the Freewheeler Racing by Phoenix Drive, then being followed by Gilles Lecky, the Canadian, head of Andrew Fellows, and then from the GPX Sport Xenon driver, it's Phoenix Racing's Shane Cotton, who will then have the company of the privateer Thomas Barjuk. On row number 19, it'll be Rob Windsor for UKSimRacing Manish, ahead of Alexander Vingmark for Beta Frost, and completing that top 40, it's Alex Brown for Stone Steady Racing and Team Nubish's Adam Adam Waters. Outside the top 40, the last couple of rows, we have Adam Hedgecock starting 41st for Altitude 3M Esports. Expect him to try and come through the field. He will be ahead there of Shane Connor for Connor Bros. SimRacing Herbert's James Connolly starts 43rd ahead of Richard Jones. And last but not least, it's going to be David Young. Well, ladies and gentlemen, several drivers have already opted to start from the pit lane as this formation lap gets underway. It's only a partial one, to be fair. However, the fact that some have started or opted to start from the pit lane may be a surprise. And to many, but not to all, given the fact I think they're worried about an open lap incident, and therefore they'd rather start from safety in the pit lane. And well, as all the drivers make the way through, you can see it here from what is the blimp camera, and the fact that we have not seen the cloud shift. And right now, if there is rainfall and you can't quite see it on this camera, how the circuit is still absolutely waterlogged here, and the rain is not falling right now, but this is wet weather conditions at their highest. And well, as the pace car peels away, it is to none other than Andrea Miato to take us away for 60 minutes of racing here in round 2 of the championship. And it's lights down, away we go here for 60 minutes of racing as Miato gets us away, and we agreed, down towards turn number 1, but as they roar the way on down here, well right now Miato leads on in, he's got clear track, but he goes straight off. Miato goes out wide, that's going to be a slowdown there for track limit, and well, everyone else right now just gradually, gingerly makes their way through the opening corner, but as they do, well done to everyone so far. They have all made their way through turn of 1 by looks of things. As we look further down that starting order, and indeed everybody is safely up through. We had a couple of drivers go a bit wide, but nothing too hairy. And meanwhile, as we come back towards the front of the field, well, they exit the hairpin right now, and it seems though everyone's getting it together or thereabouts. Reece Saunders, meanwhile, battling with Harvey Wheeler and Max Wheeler, already surrounded by the three-wheeler racing team. And Wheeler, the Audi driver, looking to get on the back of him as quickly as possible. But something tells me that as much as you have the enthusiasm to do so, I think it would be safer just to tuck behind. As all these drivers now tiptoe their way in towards turn number 6. It's definitely been an absolutely brilliant opening few quarters here from everyone. Well done to everyone involved. They've kept it together. Oh, that's a bit of a slide there for Waters. And coming in a bit too hot there is Alex Brown. And I think the slow steady racing driver, now that he's got a couple of corners behind him, I've been there, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, immediately he's gone, well, it's not so bad. I've survived the opening 4 turns, and immediately you want to do a little bit more. But Brown then realised you can't quite get away with it. As meanwhile, Martin Kenyon for DXT Motorsports in the number 11 looks down the outside of Waters there, and Waters right now enjoying a good start to his race, making some steady progress in the Aston Martin. Oh, careful, Adam, that's almost coming loose again. But meanwhile, as they make the way up into the banking, well done to everyone for surviving the opening half a lap, and well through Le Mans chicane they come, and his car's going straight on there. That was Strand, also Arneson. The Beta Foss drivers there decided to take a bit of an improvise line, I think carrying a lot of speed and just not realising there's no grip there right now. But the same can be said further back as we see Harry Shaw there for Iron Apex Esports in Lamborghini Huracan Evo, trying to keep Kyle Roy and Darren Sharp who's behind, and Roy has definitely switched on early here in that Corvette. I think he feels as though the car right now is proving to be quite predictable. We do know this car, based on what we've been hearing from drivers over the last couple of seasons, has been a car which in the dry has a very predictable nature of essentially just simply straight line out the corners. It has a lot of understeer until the rear comes loose, and therefore perhaps he's leaning into that. The idea if this car's going to understeer, as long as he gets the car pointed on corner exit, he can plant the throttle quite happily. But there's still a long way to go here as our drivers go on to lap number 2. But everyone's done a great job so far. And as soon as I say that, turn number 1 on lap number 2, it's all got a bit wrong. And once Bruno Batica and his teammate there goes to the side of him, that's going to be Darren Sharples. Another one goes off as well. Another one comes on through. And in the end, they all just about survive it there. But it is Batica who's the one who's come to the first stop. And I believe there's some other drivers with him. As meanwhile, whilst they fall, others rise. And well, we'll get a replay of what exactly happens then very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. But my goodness, that went a bit wrong. And well, they do say the commentator's curse applies, but I don't think it applies like that, surely. As Gilles Lequin, meanwhile, battling with Darren Sharp. Sharp was trying to get himself back together, of course, after what was that opening corner instant only moments ago, where he did make haste towards his teammate. And, well, I believe Batika's still out there at the moment. I don't think he's towed to the pits. I double check. In fact, yes, he has had to tow. As Gilles Lequin, I look away for 1 second. There's Lequin getting it wrong. And meanwhile, who on earth's that part sideways? I think that's Ross Young. It's Young. He's gone around at the kink, as we see onto the grass there. The old dudes in cars, BMW, Daniel Pay. He's getting a bit inventive there to avoid Ross Young. And meanwhile, also coming flying up for his Harvey Wheeler. And Wheeler's fallen backwards there. I believe he was caught up in the Batika incident. He was the other car you saw that was caught. So, lap number 2, and suddenly with a bit of confidence and a bit of temperature in the tyres. It's causing some drives to come undone, but Rhys Saunders not so. He's making his way forward as there's even more rain. Can it politely go away, please? Because right now we haven't got enough gaffer tape to seal up the commentary booth anymore from the leaks, and also for the fact, for the simple reason that our drivers right now would like it to clear up a little bit. As here comes Max Wheeler in his Audi, looking to go for it for three-wheeler racing by Phoenix. He's in a bit of a charge here as we ride on board with Max Wheeler, and well, how he can see something I do not know, but he can see those headlights now as he gets nice and close. The spray essentially ricocheting off the front bumper and then being pushed over the front of the car, and the 233 driver right now literally trying to push Saunders along. He wants Saunders to catch up to Nuno Vinagre, and well, understandably right now Wheeler here I think playing the game which is let's work together, and he's thinking about the much bigger picture, which is there's no point fighting these conditions just simply because it could all go very, very wrong very, very quickly. But as he exits turn number 1, he'll keep Saunders honest for now. And Martin Kenyon, meanwhile, a bit further back. He's on the back of Neville Harris, and well, a bit closer there. But there has been some change in our classes since how they've started. The fact of the matter being that in the interclass, well, the pole sitter has dropped a long way down. As hold on, was that car parked up there? That was Cole Roy, I just saw. Parked up on what's turn 1. Another driver falls victim to the opening corner, albeit Roy there not having a sensational incident necessarily, and he's brought himself back together. But we will get a replay of what happened at the start of lap number 2, and also perhaps what's happened to Roy in due course. But the Miracle Group M Academy driver, after a very good opening lap, he's fallen back a little bit to 6th place in the Pro class. He's still got more to do. Indeed, the same can be said for so many here. I think they're all eager to make progress. And Robin Aston, the Inter pole sitter, is in the pit lane, having repair work to the car. And well, he got caught up, of course, in the opening corner incident on lap number 2. We're going to get a replay of that in due order. But right now, in terms of lead changes, we've seen that in the Inter class, where your Inter lead now is Andrew Montine, the man who started in 3rd. In the Pro class, meanwhile, as we do look to those class standings, well, in Pro, it is Matthew Croft who leads tonight, just ahead of Harry Shaw, with the pole sitter of the class of none other than Bruno Batica and being relegated to the pit lane for what happened on lap number 2. And in the elite class, it's still the man who was on pole of Andrea Miato. And right now, he's looking quite safe here. He has not got any company behind him because Hayden Miller and William Arneson are swapping places. And, well, whether they decided by coincidence there, Betaros decided to put flames on what is the Mercedes AMG Evo, the 222 today. And, well, I can tell you one thing right now, whilst he may not be boiling away any of the water, he is carving a boiling hot trail here all the way on around Daytona. I think it's more enough water to boil a kettle, but as they make their way down towards turn number 2, Arneson right now definitely fighting his way onwards here. He's feeling quite confident as Hayden Miller tries to battle him around the outside, and that doesn't quite happen. And well, a Mercedes AMG Evo and confidence in the wet are not normally two phrases I would put side by side together, ladies and gentlemen, just because this car has a lot of torque steer in the lower gears, as Arneson right now sliding his way out of turn number 3, touching the grass there as well, and Hayden Miller looking to fight him. I'll tell you one thing, these elite drivers right now, in fact everybody out there, credit where it's due. Yes, these are absolutely inclement conditions. Yes, you wouldn't normally race these, but they are racing in them. They are not just here to put on parade laps for 60 minutes, as Arneson has a big slide coming through the kink, and right now he's driving on the absolute limit. Is the Norwegian driver here, and well, right now I do know in Norway they do have sometimes winter rallies in the snowy conditions. I don't know if William does take part in those. It'd be great to know, but if he does, I think he's drawing upon a lot of that experience right now, or indeed he's drawing upon the experience of his fellow countrymen, because Arneson is just as much sideways as he's straight, but he's showing you that he can drift 550 horsepower of GT3 in these wet conditions. But as he chases after Miato's going to look in his rearview mirror and think to himself, how on earth has that Mercedes got so close to me so quickly? And the answer is because you've got William Arneson behind the wheel right now, and he is throwing this car at the circuit, and I think he's taken the approach which is, until it spins, I'm here to win. And well, we can't blame him for that. But as we look down the order, we look to Craig Hewlett, who is battling with none other than Andrew Montine, the Access Y driver, looking to go high here versus his colleague from the Z team. And looking around the outside he goes, as they do, coming onto the brakes. Will it be a swap of positions? Hewlett does seem to beat his rival in towards the braking zone for the Le Mans chicane, and in the end Hewlett does sweep his way around the outside, and behind Richard Simnor closes up to the back of this, the 9th place elite driver. I think he's thinking, right, if they can have some fun, I can have some too. And the DCW racing driver right now, going Ford Mustang, that definitely is looking to want to wobble on the throttle application. It's getting closer and closer as he powers his way along. This Ford will be quite quick in the draft. It's quite quick by default, albeit it has been hit quite hard in recent seasons on the bounce points. It doesn't quite have the top end it used to. He looks up high here. Right now, Simon trying to go around the outside of the team, and in the end, he will glide his way around. And of course, that's another interesting thing as well with these wet conditions, how they've had to change the setups on these cars. As we do see Nathan Anstis going low and passing Darren Sharples. In fact, normally at Daytona, you would look to run a low to minimum downforce setup here. But in the wet, of course, naturally, you want stability over the rear axles. That means you add more rear wing. But I wonder if there's any absolutely crazy individuals out there who've actually decided to keep the rear wing low on the car and just be a lot more careful of the throttle. If they have, and they're able to keep it together, you may suddenly find there's going to be about a 5 to 6 mile an hour speed difference by default in the straights. That's the car go wide. That's Alex Brown there showing you how wide you can go. I think he'll get away with that, given he cut wide early at the corner rather than midway through it, because the track limits have been very much tightened and strengthened at turn number 1, because the Optima Esports line, as it used to be done, going all the way out wide to what was the runoff area. That's a no-go anymore. But Brown, they went so wide on entry, I think, that if he was to pick up a slow down there, it would have been burned by the time he would have rejoined, as we have seen Shane Connor take the place for 8th into off of him. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to make our way back in time and take a look back at what happened on lap number 2 for Robin Aston and Bruno Batica. So this was Robin Aston making his way onwards at the time. Batica was already at the corner, I believe. And this was Aston making his way. He went out wide, and in doing so rejoined, but he cut across that white line. Car went spinning around. Batica had already gone, of course. There he is. And then the whole field had to segue its way on through. But what exactly happened to Batica? Well, we did see the contact of the 177. And this was the on-board from Batica's perspective when it went wrong. So went under braking, and as he did so, well, tried to get the car stopped. It touched the white line on the outside, went to turn through. The rear right tyre had a bit of spin, and then that was Harvey Wheeler following him in synchronisation there. And, well, right now, it's not a Torvald and Dean impression they're doing, but both tries to get it wrong, and then suddenly, biff. It was like that for Bruno Batica, the contact with his teammate, and that really was the damage that's put him out of the race. We had this later on the lap for Henrik Strand. This was Strand making his way out of turns 2 and 3, sideways initially in that Ford Mustang for Beta Frost, all over the back of Miato, and in the end just a bit too eager to try and take the lead, and outbroke himself there into the horseshoe hairpin, and that's what relegated him backwards. But in the end he did manage to collect it together, or thereabouts. He got it a bit wrong, and we had what was a bit more difficulty for some other tries later on that lap, including for Alex Brown. This was Brown making his way down towards turn 1 as well, and as he made his way into that braking zone, I think here, this is also what happened to him a lap later. Went very wide, went increasingly wide, and somebody decided to follow him in solidarity. That was the Ferrari there. I can't quite see whose Ferrari that was. I think that was Thomas Barger who decided. But to be fair to Brown, he then performed the Moses manoeuvre from between 2 drivers. That was between Sheila Key and none other than what was, I believe, a Ford Mustang at the time. So that was quite impressive from Brown. Got it all together there. And then we did have, of course, what was a bigger shunt on lap number 2 for David Young. This went very, very wrong, very quickly for the BMW driver. What exactly went wrong? Well, here is the understanding. He went his way into the kink and well, no, not into the kink, into turn 7, and decided to go out so wide in the end, he touched the grass before he got to the braking zone, and that's why the car came loose on him. Did well to avoid the tyre barrier, but then had to try and rejoin, and he did get the power down, to be fair, David. He was able to bring it back together. I was wondering whether the car was going to come loose again and trigger off what would have been a bit of a skill effect there, but it did not. Well done to him for that, because many would have got that wrong. And then we had this for Ross Young on lap number 3. This was Young making his way across that timeline, and as he did so into turn number 1, well, that's not good for Ross Young. He's ends up pretty much going so deep out of 1, and what's happened there is essentially as he come onto the brakes, I think the rear right tyre has actually lost traction on what was the yellow painted surface there as he's coming down. I wonder if he dropped gears too aggressively and he spun up that wheel more than normal, because that was a very odd one there. The car actually going to the wall rather than to the inside of the circuit, which is what you would expect. But it went wrong for Ross Young, and we also had this only moments ago for none other than Gilles Lequy on lap number 5. And this was Lequy making his way down towards the opening corner. I think turn 1's definitely going to be the scene of some big moments today. And well, he made his way under braking, just went straight on at this point. The car was not going to stop, kept going, still kept going, and then suddenly decided, oh, I've made it to turn 7, I better head back right now. And that's the equivalent of his sat-nav on board, not that he has one saying, you need to do a 180-degree turn. But credit where it's due to Gilles, he could have just gone straight on. He decided to go back instead, and well, we can't blame him for that. That is a very observant to the rules there from him. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's head back to your live racing. as we come on back, well, even more to come between all our drivers there before all is said and done. But right now, well, this race definitely taking a trip to what is the weeds and the waters. But as our drivers continue to push on, credit where it's due to everyone. One lap number 7, we're almost 15 minutes in, and everybody keeping it together thus far. And well, I can tell you one thing. They are all doing an absolutely, oh goodness me, as we had a bit of a technical issue there. We do apologise, as our replay screen decided it didn't want to cooperate. We sincerely apologise for that. As our drivers make the round around right now, well, the point being, absolutely keeping it together. And well, Andrea Miato for Tartan Reztec definitely enjoyed himself out there, no doubt about it. They all are, as they draw the way onwards. Henrik Strand following him, and as he does, well, I can imagine the Beta Frost driver there from Norway thinking to himself one thing and one thing only, and that is, we'll keep it together right now, and that lead may come to him. However, one driver meanwhile behind, who is gradually making some more progress. After a slow start, he fell down from second place all the way to fifth. He's now back into third. It is none other than Pietro Antonio Pasquarello, who right now in that Lamborghini is looking to be in a much more comfortable place. And after what's the Sachsenring, where in the end it really was just chasing after the bottom end of the top 10 in the elite class and overall, I wonder here whether he feels as though with these conditions, and with also the good qualifying lap, the Lamborghini's really got the grunt to do well. Of course, powered by an Audi engine in the back, the V10 engine that you hear scream in the Audi R8 Evo 2. And so the V10 engine we will no longer be hearing on the road, and very gradually not hearing in motorsport for much longer, given the fact that Audi have decided to hang up the time with the Audi R8. It's only supported in customer fashion at the moment, with Audi putting all their resources really into a Formula 1 campaign, taking over from the old Sauber team. And in the meantime, Lamborghini getting ready very soon to transition to their new GT3, which I think is stepping away from the current Audi V10 power plant. But either way, right now, it's always going to be immortalised here on iRacing, as we look back to your inter-leader of Andrew Montaigne. He's currently running in 9th place overall, ahead of the pro leader Matthew Croft, who's right behind him. These Access Sport drivers right now, I think they're all just trying to work this race together. Meanwhile, Max Wheeler's had a bit of a spin at turn number 7, and as he makes way onwards, we haven't quite got the replay footage of it, but what we can tell you is it's dropped behind a Richard Simnor, who's taken the place off of him. So Wheeler right now carrying on. I think he was able to avoid the barrier or thereabouts. Well, the Audi R8 continues to push its way on around the circuit. But what about strategy, I hear you ask? Will there be any strategy today other than survive? Well, they will need to pit at some point, and that will be to take on fuel. They can't get to the end of the race on the fuel tanks they start with. That's a restriction, of course, these feature races. It does add a strategic element. However, with the fact they will not be using anywhere near as much throttle application as they would in the dry, you can imagine that when they do come into the pit, our drivers will not have to spend anywhere near as long in that pit lane. As, hold the phone, Alex Brown's found his way to the barrier. That's at turn 7. He wants to rejoin, but I think right now, with all the cars very gradually making their way through, he can't. Can he get himself going now? Hopefully he can. That's Thomas Barjot. Now there comes through what is the car Gilles Lequy. We also can see the car there, Grant Miller, making his way on par. So everybody's making their way through. And well, in fact, no, there is Grant Miller coming up behind. That was a different car. That was Shane Cotton, the other Phoenix Racing McLaren. And Brown does get himself turned to the end, but well done to him for waiting patiently. Not many do, to be fair. And, well, patience is a virtue that every sim racer, indeed every real-life racer needs to learn. That's Lance D racing driver right now after that spin. And, well, he's back on course, and we're going to try and chase down the win. As meanwhile, we look to Adam Hedgecock a bit further back. And for the Altitude 3M esports driver, and of course, very, very good SimRacing photographer. Well, right now, the Hedge photography driver currently 31st, 8th in the pro class, making some gradual ground after a bit of a difficult qualifying session, but I think he'd like a lot more ground than this gradually. His next target is Kyle Roy. Oh, as Hedgecock gets it wrong, and the car's to the barrier there. Front left going straight towards the concrete barrier. And, well, the 131 driver, as he gets it turned back around, understandably at this point, I think that's going to be a bit of a knock. Hopefully it's not the suspension out of alignment. Otherwise, that could be an early pit stop for him in order to repair it. But the good news is, as I was alluded to earlier, the fact that we're not expecting as much fuel to be used, it does massively open the pit window here for our drivers, whereby, whilst we can't know exactly how much fuel they're going to use, because as the weather conditions change and the amount of standing water changes on the circuit, the drier the circuit gets, the higher the pace will be, and therefore the more aggressive drivers will be on the throttle. The more rain that falls, it's the opposite way round. But if you can imagine, our normal pit window would be somewhere in the region around 20 minutes into the race through to what is around 40 to 45 minutes minutes into the race. Because of these conditions, we may actually see the pit window open up as Hedgecock is coming to the pit. I suspected as much, perhaps to repair the damage and also to get his mandatory stop out of the way. He has got the ability to do so. I suspect the pit window will be anywhere from around 15 minutes into the race to around 50 minutes into the race. So we suddenly have this huge pit window, and some of you might be sat there thinking, well, what about tyre changes? Do they dare come off their current wet tyres? Yes and no. Again, that is very dependent on the track, because these wet tyres, of course, they are treaded tyres. The idea is they have these massive blocks with slots between them, and that helps displace the water, much like a road car tyre, if you will. Indeed, I'm sure many of you have seen a road car tyre there, whereas normal dry tyres, of course, in these machines, they will be slicks. They have no tread blocks on them, and the idea is they're completely flat to the tarmac to offer the best possible grip on the dry. The only problem with a slick tyre is, as soon as you go onto a wet surface, the car practically just aquaplanes on water on a slick tyre, because there is no tread block on the tyre to displace the water or push the water through and around the tyre. But the importance is these wet tyres, as they are worn down, they become closer and closer to a slick. As the heat wears off the blocks, then you get a tyre that is more proximate to a slick. But how much that will they have worn down in these conditions, and it depends on how hard they're pushing the tyre and how much they can cool it. I don't think they're going to have any problems cooling wet tyres here today. It's just the fact, of course, we have quite a few very aggressive traction zones around here, and that may just burn some life out the tyre. I think a lot of drivers may opt just to put fuel in the car and stay on the wet tyres that they've warmed up, with the idea being that they don't want to have to go through the whole reheating phase of a new tyre, because that can cost you just as much time in the wet as it can when you're on the older tyres, essentially. Because if you cannot get the heat into the tyre when you come out the pit lane, of course we do have a very tight pit lane exit, which is essentially a hairpin. The problem you're going to have is if you can't get the heat into the tyre and then you make your way to turn number 4, get the power down there, and unless you're very careful, you could be spinning around and suddenly you're going to overheat the tyre as soon as you put it on the car. But as Harry Shaw right now continues to make his way onwards, well, the Iron Apex Esports driver definitely in the 157, enjoying a very strong run here. Matthew Croft is still the man he's got to beat today, and Croft right now is 7 seconds up the road, but Shaw is matching him for pace quite well. In fact, the last lap, Shaw took the best part of 3 seconds out of Croft. So Lamborghini driver here, mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, it normally does have a bit of an advantage in the wet, for the simple reason that the fact that the weight's over the rear, so it plants down the rear wheels when he tries to get the power down. I can imagine right now he's feeling quite confident in these conditions. Back to some fighting that's visible on screen. This is Daniel Payne versus Neville Harris as they come down in towards the Le Mans chicane. Behind them is the McLaren. In fact, that is a Ferrari that's a lap down there of Steve Hobbs. I'm going to need to get my eyes adjusted. And the old duty cars drive from Portugal right now, doing a good job of chasing after that 5th place in class. I think he'll want a little bit more as we jump on board the dash cam. And as we do here, with the rain absolutely hammering the windscreen. And you can hear it there coming off that windscreen, very loud indeed. But right now, Payne, he can't see the car in front of him, but the battle box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, he can't see that. But we can promise you guys and girls can see it. Well, that confirms that Harris is there. As you can see, Payne decides to go nice and low in order to be able to see the approach to turn number 1. And he goes back onto what is the wet racing line. Goes a little bit deep. Oh, goodness me, Harris, they're almost losing the rear. Payne goes over the white line. He keeps it together, however, just about. But Payne's there, definitely using up one of his proverbial 9 lives in these wet conditions as he makes his way up towards turn number 4, mounting those curves there at turns 2 and 3. You don't do that in the dry, let alone in the wet, but Payne right now seems to know something that everybody else doesn't in this BMW. I wonder how well they've set it up for these conditions. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of teams have come here today with both a dry setup and a wet setup on the car, and then Payne has come here with a setup right now that seems to be able to actually clobber the curbing and feel a lot more confident. The only problem is that with that spray in front, that's going to hold him back a little bit because it just takes away his visibility. So what he's got to hope is Harris in front has a very slow run into one of these corners, and if Payne can potentially look for a move, or he can get the drag strip run all the way around the oval. We'll see as they come out 6 in towards 7. Again here under braking in towards the next corner. That'll be as much lifting off the throttle and then doing it on muscle memory as he runs out wide. But Harris there getting so much more traction coming out of turn number 7. And that's what the Porsche 992 is very good at. Rear engine, rear wheel drive. It can get the throttle down better than anything else in the wet. And Harris right now just able to open that gap back up to a whole second. Hayes has got the pace, he's got the confidence, but Harris has got the car under him that's making the difference. And as they make the way around, we look back to Nick Parks here, who fights William Arneson, and Arneson has recently pitted, and a whole new set of tyres have gone on Arneson's car. He's had a very long pit stop, and I think some repair work's also gone on the car. So Arneson has decided to go all in and to try and make his way back up the order, as Nick Parks, meanwhile, well, he has also pitted. In fact, he started from the pit lane, so he has not actually made a strategic stop as of yet. But Parks right now continues to gradually make his way up the running order. But as our drivers carry on, and if we get a bit closer to the halfway point of this race, I think it's only fair we take a look back at some big moments, as we have just had actually a couple of huge moments, including a big one into the barriers for Harry Shaw. And here's a replay, ladies and gentlemen, to explain. So we take a trip back in time. This was the man who was running second in the pro class, and the sun came out for a brief moment. Into turn one he went deep, right inside tyres, they're going beyond the white line, and unfortunately glide into the barrier of Harry Shaw. And well, I think the confidence was building, but unfortunately it's come back to haunt him a bit, and that was his race to the pit lane. This happened to Harvey Wheeler, already a lap down after his earlier incident on what's turn one and lap two. And I think we're going to have a theme here, which is it's happened at turn one again for many a driver, and wheeling in just goes straight on and gets the car stopped in time. But at that point, I suspect he was going to tow to the pits. We then had Shane Connor have this happen in the very big NSX of Connor Road, and as he made his way down, well, letting the leaders go on through. And we had a change of leader there, by the way. That's Henrik Riestrand, who's made his way through in towards turn one that lap. And we tucked into the tow behind them, and he used the runoff area there just to simply steer clear of them. So good awareness from him, and well done from everyone on that one. And we've also just had this happen to Hayden Miller. Now, this was the man at the time who was still trying to find his way back up through the field after having just pitted, in fact. Goes into turn one, runs out wide, and turn one washes out another driver, and in the end he tries to pirouette it, but it ends up grinding to the barrier. So that's gone wrong for Hayden Miller. Let's head back to what is your live pictures. We do, ladies and gentlemen, well, still very much more to come in this race. Indeed, everyone right now still trying to survive as best they can, as we come back to none other than Nick Parks, the privateer, who right now enjoying a very quiet bit of space out on the circuit, but understandably, like many, I think he'll be wondering what's to come next from the story here at Daytona. As there's your confirmation of Riestrand, now your leader, having found his way past Miato on the run just before they came up to what was Connor. We did see that in the replay footage. Strand right now for Beta Frost flashing his headlights there. Not that I think the driver in front of him is going to notice them, or if he does, he'll have the blue flags waving. That's what he'll notice more. But right now, Strand, I think, trying to say to the world in front of him, look, get out of my way, I'm trying to run away with the lead of this one. And you can understand he wants this win. He wants to bring parity versus his teammate of William Arneson. Arneson down in 23rd place at this time. But as we do see Strand make his way out the inside there, putting a lap onto none other than the Mercedes of Ross Young, who is now 2 laps down. Young, meanwhile, just trying to stay on track and keep things together for some points today. And I think that's going to be one of the big things now for anybody who has had a big incident, which is you can't afford to give up, because if you do, you suddenly will lose out. As Nick Parks there goes round the outside of Neville Harris. A nice move there, as I think Harris somehow managed to find a way onto the grass there coming across the start-finish line, because Harris was going very slowly and seemed to be recovering. But Parks is not going to question that. He will take it, and he moves up into 7th now in the interclass. But Parks definitely doing a very good job here of making that progress. And well, right now I think for what will be him, it's going to be more to come from Parks. He carries on his way, but the number 35 driver here, confidence is abounding, no doubt about it. And well, the Briton on his way down towards the second of our hairpins here. And his next target is Alexander Wingmark, who is only 7 seconds up the road. And Parks right now matching him for pace, but of course there's still a long way to go, and any mistake for either driver could prove a race winning or race ending. But meanwhile, coming back to your lead card, here is Pietro Antonio Pasquarello, the Titan Resitec driver from Italy. Well, he's fallen back a little bit as Richard Simnor has found his way on through, so has Rhys Saunders, and he's got Max Wheeler for company now. As we look back from the rear of the 2-2-3, thankfully our camera's not on the rear bumper, but he goes very deep. Wheeler, meanwhile, tries to look up the inside, but that's all for naught. And as we said earlier, and do keep in mind the fact that in these wet conditions, the normal racer line no longer really applies. It might be a bit of a guideline, but one thing you definitely don't want to do is touch the curbs. The curbs suddenly become absolute nightmare spots for grip because of the fact they have standing water on them, and curbs don't offer more grip by default in the dry. They just offer you the ability to essentially open up the road surface a little bit more if you dare. However, in the wet, they really become a nightmare situation because water normally gets trapped on them. Alternatively, if you run beyond them, there's normally a lot of standing water out there that will not be boiled away through track temperature. Pasquarello right now keeping it well within the white lines, and as he makes his way up towards the barrier there onto the bank in the turn number 8, we briefly lose him for a moment and he comes back to life. We do apologise for that. That does seem to be a slight technical hitch. Hopefully it's not the sign of an issue coming to the Italian's car. We don't want to see any retirement due to technical issues if we can help it. makes his way onwards. He's now actually catching up to Richard Simnor, who's made a complete ham sandwich of turn number 7, it looks like. Alternatively, he's completely backed off one of the two because Pasquale right now, he was a second behind, and Sonny, he's right there. I can imagine the Lamborghini just having so much traction on that period. He's able to feel a lot more confident as soon as they build up the power, but then Simnor, once he gets into 4th, 5th and 6th gear, and he doesn't have to worry about those things called corners, suddenly this Mustang absolutely wants to fly on the banking. And, well, making his way past the pit lane again shortly. I suspect we won't see him duck on in. The DCW Racing driver here just making sure that he stays out right now and sticks to the strategy. And whilst there has not really been any rain falling for the last 10 minutes or so, we're definitely not seeing this circuit dry up at all. Even if the sun has made a guest appearance here, well, I can promise you it is the actual sun. Nobody's decided just to turn on a floodlight and put it on a very warm temperature setting. But I think our drivers will feel as though that's what it is right now. Simnor goes very sideways out of turn number 1. My goodness, the rear of that Mustang coming loose. And again, Simnor really driving on the limit here. I think the pressure's building a little bit with Pasquale and Wheeler getting close. And this is where you see the difference of front-engine rear-wheel drive versus mid-engine rear-wheel drive in terms of how the car flexes through these corners at lower speed and how getting the power down is easy for some but not for all. Wheeler at the back of this in the Audi, well, he'll be hoping that he can battle his fellow Audi power plant machine and then make the progress, but look at the differences in line as well. Pasquale and Wheeler taking much more pointed lines in towards the hairpin because the rear of the car will naturally come around and they can get it dialed in easier. Meanwhile, Simnor by comparison has to go very deep into the corner, open the corner up, and also I think there the fact there's a lot of water congregating on that inside line, he doesn't want to risk touching it whatsoever. But out to the barriers they go, and as they do, this is then suddenly where the Mustang is able to pull away a little bit more as they roar the way around. Pasquale will have the draft here. Well, the Mustang has one thing that it does best, and that is V8 pony power as he roars his way under the sunlight. We'll get a bit of rain there and sunlight. Well, we wanted the sun, and suddenly the rain decides, hey, can I come along as well? But it does seem as though perhaps we will start to get a slightly drier circuit, although I put that in inverted commas with the emphasis on the fact that if we do get a slightly dry circuit, I don't think we're going to see anybody on slicks. And if anybody does decide to go to slicks, sadly, we won't be able to bring you that information due to limitations of an iRacing replay file, but we'll probably be able to guess if somebody's gone to slicks because I can imagine we're going to very quickly see them making their way back to the pit lane for either repair work or to put a new set of wets on instead. Here's Andrew Fellows meanwhile, currently running in 15th of the Interclass as he carries on. He has made his one and only pit stop, but that was for damage early on. But I wouldn't be surprised, given the fact he did spend the best part of 2.5 minutes in the pit, whether that's actually enabled him to take his strategic stop right there and then. We'll see, because he did spend a long time in the pit lane early on. It may have just worked out for him as we've had a bit more difficulty for Adam Hedgecock. He's come out to turn number 7. He's had a little bit of slide loose. He's lost out to Grant Miller by the looks of things. However, beyond that, he is still, well, not Grant Miller, he's lost out to David Young. Let me get my names correct here. Other than that, he is still A-OK as Adam Hedgecock. After what was his trip to the barrier, coming out of Le Mans chicane, the best part of 7 minutes ago. Got the car into the pit lane, got it repaired, and also took his mandatory fuel stop. So Hedgecock using adversity to his advantage. And, well, that's the way you've got to do it. You've got to think on the spot when it all goes a bit wrong. In terms of close drivers battling each other, here's Robin Pownier being passed by Casper Rotner. And well, in fact, not Casper Rotner, that's Daniel Payne making his way past Tessa Payne, coming roaring into turn number 1. And we've got a bit of fight in our hands there between the two front engine rear-wheel drive marks, the Mercedes of Pownier versus the BMW of Page. But coming through towards turn number 4, Hayes is absolutely flying right now. And, well, both drivers here off to the start from the pit lane. And they still do need to take a pit stop, but it's looking as though Hayes right now has definitely got an ace up his sleeve. And meanwhile, well, we've got William Arneson down in 21st place. He's setting the fastest laps of everybody at the moment. So Arneson, having pitted early on, I think he feels as though there's a bit of magic coming his way. And the circuit was drying up. And then suddenly, the rain's come back again. And, well, that's going to suddenly slow the pace down of everybody. However, I think William Arneson will be thinking that he can be the one coming all the way through the field. Perhaps he'll surprise us all come the very end. As Henrik Riestrand, meanwhile, goes even faster on a 58.82. The Beta Frost driver, he's still trying to chase down Andrea Miato. And Miato right now may not be the fastest in that Aston Martin at the front of the field, but he doesn't need to be the fastest as everybody else is tripping over themselves here in the wet. And right now, I can imagine that for Strand, they need so many behind that we're all probably thinking to themselves, how do we get close enough to Aston Martin without making a mistake? Well, you've got to drive smart and you've got to drive consistent. And it's not saying they can't do it, but it's such a fine line between driving on the limit and driving where the car feels comfortable, as that's the car round. That's Shane Connor who's found his way around in the Acura, and how on earth he's ended up there, I don't know. But what I can tell you is the fact the car's parked there, it's beached in the grass at the moment. Can he get it moving? Yes, he can. And he reverses it. Can he get it going in the forward direction? I think he's moved it back there as another car comes loose. That's Ross Young, who gets very, very wide out. And in the end, Young avoids the barrier this time on the outside of the circuit after what is his way of making haste there earlier on. And for Ross Young, the DXT Motorsports driver, he gets it together just in the nick of time, but he does move out there to what is the Ferrari in front of him of Steve Hobbs. Meanwhile, and he coming through. In fact, that's the Ferrari of Thomas Bargett. Let me just clarify that. He is a lap ahead of him, but Young losing out versus Shane Costner and Grant Miller have both found their way through. Shane Connor has rejoined eventually. The Connor Bros drive has made his way back on. He's now down to 38th or 17th in the interclass. And, well, he's trying to figure out where to go here. Everyone's trying to figure out where Shane Connor's going, but I think that's a bit of miscommunication between two drivers. It's not Connor's fault. I think there was a bit of an expectation from what was Nuno Navarre that he was going to see Shane Connor go deep into the corner to respect the blue flags, whereas Connor backed off completely. And I think in his haste, the Portuguese driver Vinagre in the end got a little bit mistaken. And well, they sorted it out in the end. But understanding, I think both drivers there had their hearts skip a beat, wondering what the other was doing. It happens in these conditions, and the fact that they were able to negotiate it shows the fact that they've both got very patient heads on them. But patience is running out a little bit here for what is Max Wheeler. So I see some front end damage there for Pasquarello's Lamborghini. That wasn't there a couple of laps ago, as he had a bit of a moment with somebody else, because you can see the front of the car's actually been pushed in a little bit, and those headlights right now are not looking happy, the endurance floodlight. But meanwhile, Wheeler looking around the outside. Can he get this done in the Audi? And the answer is going to be no. The Lamborghini is just a bit quicker on the stretch, but under braking here, can he find a bit of magic? He's going to try and switch back in towards turn number one. I don't think switchback's going to be the easiest move as we ride aboard with the Freewheeler Racing 233. But this is a battle well and truly on for 5th place overall in the elite class. And they're enjoying a good little scrap. They've been like this for the best part of the last 5 to 6 laps. But Pasquarello, something is falling off the proverbial bus for the Lamborghini driver. And well, these two drivers so closely matched. Indeed, their door numbers an indication of how closely they are matched. Heading up towards turn number 6. Well, if you can see the corner apex, ladies and gentlemen, please let me know, because I definitely can't. Wheeler somehow finds his way to, but do keep in mind the fact he's sat on the left-hand side of the car. Your camera is on the right-hand side, so therefore he would have had a bit more sighting. And that's why you will see what drivers will do here with the spray is they will pull the car slightly out of the draft of the car in front, just to help them see, depending on where they're sat in the car. As we know, Pasquarello there looking up the inside of a car that he's trying to put a lap down. And that is the Porsche there that he is following of none other than Andrew Fellows. And we're trying to put a second lap onto Fellows at this point. And Fellows holding his line right now. And I suspect that a lot of drivers here, as they're having the leaders come up to lap them, either for the first time or a second time or more, they are all going to essentially be taking logic, which is it's for the leader to find a way past me, not for me to just get out of the way, because the safety of just simply holding your line is absolutely critical. As Wheeler right now finds a double spray, that's why we come out the car there, so you can see the fact that he has to look up the inside at last minute for Fellows, and he does so he doesn't really lose out any time there. And Pasquarello will probably be thinking to himself, what does it take to get that Audi to go away right now? Well, the answer is traffic's not going to help him. He's going to need to find an alternative way. But in all of what's going on, an update in the interclass. We do have a new leader, Craig Hewlett. He's back on top at the moment. But Andrew Montine has pitted. He pitted on lap 14. Hewlett has not. So therefore, we believe strategically, Andrew Montine is the highest placed inter driver. But on the track, at least, it is this man, as we show you the class standings once again. Bearing in mind, of course, that we do have pit stops that are still to come. Plenty of them still on the cards. The only alternative feeling would be, would anyone try to go for the no-stop here, in the fact that given how slow the pace is, they are essentially 16 to 17 seconds off a normal pace, as Hewlett tries to come into pits, but there's so much standing water. In the end, he pirouettes his way into the pit lane. He comes to a stop. Oh, goodness me, as that's almost contact there for what is the Mercedes AMG coming down of Matthew Croft. And, well, that would have been a conversation between the Axis Sinsport teams there, as Hewlett does get himself back together. Pit limits are on, and, well, that's definitely one way of coming into the pit lane, not the way you normally do. And Croft, of course, the leader in the pro class for Axis Sinsport Z, almost being collected by the Y. And, well, my goodness, that was very close to tears between the two of them there, and we're going to have to get a replay of that shortly. But for Matthew Croft, he'll be breathing a sigh of relief. But what it does mean is that for the first time this the season. Sean Connor takes the lead of the Pro Class here for Connor Bros in the 155, and the American driver right now on home soil. Well, could he potentially be bringing home a podium, if not the win in the Pro Class? We will see. There's still a lot to unfold here. It's not over yet, and well, this race will definitely not be over until they get to the checkered flag. Like any other race, of course, but in this one, I think there's going to be twists and turns all the way through to the very end. This really is going to be the one race where the plot line right now is less of a straight line and more of a scribble on a piece of paper. But as the 155 driver makes his way towards turn number 7, the rain falls again, and you can definitely see right now that he is just taking it very easy here. But there's something to be said about drivers who can drive this way. It sounds very odd me saying it, but there is a mentality that you have to have in these wet conditions, and a lot of individuals do not have it at first. It is not easy to drive to the conditions of the circuit. They always say it, whether it be on the simulator or whether you're going for your racing license test, at least in the UK, they say you drive to the conditions out there and then build the pace. A lot of drivers, when they get out there, they do it the opposite way around. They drive to the pace and then the conditions, and that's where the mistakes are made. But right now, Connor definitely doing a very solid job here, as outside of all this, we have got some intrigue playing out in the elite class, and that is Henrik Riestrand is into the pit lane from the lead of the race, and so is Tim Perry. Here is Perry making his way on down pit row as he goes to pull in and then realises, no, it's not there, it's further down. I think the team's shouting over the radio, Tim, you've still got the best part of about 150 metres to go. Where are you going? And the 283 driver finally makes his way in as Riestrand meanwhile leaves the pit lane with a very short and quick stop there, so he's not changed any tyres, or if he has, he's changed one, although I don't think he'd do that. So he's come back out in 6th place, and he'll be hoping that this is going to be enough now to give himself the chance to chase down the lead, as he's the highest placed driver who has pitted. So theoretically he's a strategic leader in this race overall, but we will see what is to come next. As meanwhile, Daniel Pays all over the back of Andre Montine. These two on very different races. Pays having started from the pit lane, he has yet to pit. Montine meanwhile has pitted as Robin Pownier is coming from the lead of what is the interclass. So Andrew Montine at this point, I think, as Pays also comes into the pits, the fuel tanks are starting to run a bit dry. We didn't, well, in the end we got it a bit wrong there in terms of how long they could go, but Montine retakes the lead of the interclass as Pownier waits. And who else is to come through? Craig Hewlett is to still come through. And Hewlett right now, will he jump up to 2nd place here in Inter, or will Pownier take that accolade? As Rob Windsor leaves the pit lane, as I look at my content booth window, and Pownier is just leaving his pit box at the moment. Now Hewlett's still making his way around the bank into turn 12. I think Pownier's coming out in 2nd here much more quickly than we anticipated. So he makes his way on out, and Daniel Pays, he might just steal 3rd place away here as he makes his way on out. Where's Hewlett? There he is. Hewlett's not going to be coming out in 3rd. He's going to be coming back out in 4th then when this is all said and done. Pays has managed to get the jump on him, although he's got to be very careful here as he leaves the pit lane. It will be very treacherous, and there you can see Hewlett in the rear of the picture. It's going to be close between the two of them. Pays gets so close to the wall there, I think he's going to make haste to it. Makes his way on out, and Hewlett is back out in 4th then. Pays has leapt his way all the way to 3rd, and Hewlett immediately looks up the inside, and in the end he can't quite do it, and that was the big slide loose in the pits there. That has cost Hewlett 3rd place, if not 2nd as well. So suddenly Hewlett's now got to do the work on the road if he wants the podium spots, or if he wants to chase down this win in the interclass. But it is a long way to go with 19 minutes of the final lap left on the clock. In the Pro Class meanwhile, Sean Connor has still yet to pit, so has Nathan Anstis and Darren Sharples and Kyle Roy. They are all staying out, so what is 4 of your top 5 in Pro have not pitted. Matthew Croft is the only one who pitted. He pitted at the same time with Craig Hewlett. And well, speaking of that infamous pit stop, we take a look back in time to show you it from what was firstly Craig Hewlett's perspective, and here we go. So this was on board with Craig Hewlett at the time as he made his way into the pit lane, and as he did so, well, backed off, put the brakes on, slowed the car down, and as he tried to get it all under control, the car just completely skidded loose. And well, watch the rear view camera in 3, 2, 1. Oh my good lord, that was Matthew Croft coming into the pit lane. This is what it looked like from Croft's perspective by comparison as he made his way around. The fuel was saying it was low, and well, as he made his way along, went down, took a much shallower entry line. I think that was the difference. A load of spray up in front, and then he suddenly sees, oh, Craig's gone very sideways there. Well, I'll just go to the right of him, respecting the cone. Oh, goodness me, Craig, don't reverse like that. And the car rolling backwards there for Craig Hewlett as he tried to get it to stop. And that's how close the two of them were. And suddenly, well, I can imagine there might be a conversation between the two of them after the race as to what exactly happened. Meanwhile, outside of the pit lane, we had this on lap 20 for Casper Brotner. So the old dudes in cars driver having a bit of a difficult day, and his difficulties, they never went away at turn 1. Went to rejoin after putting 2 balls beyond the white line, and the car just saying no. And we also had this for Alexander Vingmark, who was on the same lap. And this was Beta Frost driver making his way in towards turn 1. And, well, does he put 2 balls beyond the white line? Yes, he does. Goes to bring the car back on. The standing water there simply just gobbles him up and says, nope, you're with me. You're going to have to take what is a 5-second stop and go penalty there on the exit of turn number 1. Indeed, that does seem to be the stop and go zone at turn 1. There's a puddle there that just takes everybody who treads into it and then lets them go off to about 5 to 10 seconds. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we head back to your live racing pictures. So back we come, and this race is still not done. We still have quite a bit of time left on it, although we're not complaining. And right now, for everybody out there, as we look back to the overall standings, well, who is leading? Who right now has still got to come on in? Well, I can tell you that Pasquarello has made his way into the pit lane, so has Simnor, so has Vinagre, but we still have Max Wheeler who's yet to pit. The same for Andrea Miato, who in fact has been passed off camera. We haven't quite caught down the replays, but Wheeler and Miato have swapped places. I think there has actually been a mistake for Miato. Yes, there was. Last lap, he was 9 seconds slower. I think there was a slide loose at one of the corners, and right now Andrea Miato, who really has been an anchor at the top of the field, or even the very best can make mistakes. No doubt about it, as hold the phone. That is his teammate there for Tartan Res Tech coming out the pit lane. He's had a moment. And that's Pasquarello who's gone around, coming out the pits in towards turn number 4. So right now the wheels on the bus are falling off for the Italian team, and well, not at the right time either. They don't want this happening right now, as Tim Perry's going to get a bit close here, but we'll have to wait and see whether Miato can get it back together. Of course, Reece Strand, who was the man who was leading before the pit stops really played out, he will, if he's informed of the fact that Miato's had a spin and Wheeler's ahead of him, I think Reece Strand will be thinking for Beta Frost that this is now his race to lose. As William Arneson, meanwhile, he's still on a mission here to try and recover the place he lost early on, as he makes his way around in 10th place in the 222, with no sign of anyone really close behind him as he slides his way into turn number 6. You can see the car there coming loose on traction for a brief moment, and then it grips back up. But Arneson right now really pushing this Mercedes around the circuit, and indeed, you can imagine if he had an oar, he would be paddling with it out the left-hand window, but not so. He's got to keep 2 hands on the wheel. And we do see here Craig Hewlett, meanwhile, the Axis Simple wide driver, trying to find his way past Casper Brotno, who's acting a bit of interference here between himself and the old dudes in cars driver of Daniel Pays. The teammates of Brotner and Pays, they'll be grateful to be together as Hewlett tries to go around the outside. Now, to be fair to Casper Brotner, he can legally fight overall with Hewlett, so long as he's not intentionally blocking, it's all fair. And that's the one thing about having a team on the circuit, although Axis Sim Sports, they'll know the same, to be fair, but for Hewlett right now, he's got to find his way past the elite driver. However, what might not be illegal, of course, is if Brotner was to get close to Pays, and he's so close to him that it's obvious he's got the pace advantage, only just to sit there for what will be the rest of the race and act as a bit of a rolling roadblock to Hewlett. Not that he's going to do that, to be fair, but just to give you context to how teams can use one another to defend versus the fact when they're not allowed to, when they're going across what is the line, if you will, of the rules and regulations. But Brotner is now making haste after Pays. I wouldn't be surprised if come the next lap, he'll be ahead of him, and then he'll be back inside the overall top 15, as Hewlett will look to try and continue his journey. Speaking of another old dudes in cars driver who's trying to make a journey back through the field, remember, he was involved in the madness on lap number 2 at turn 1. Bruno Batica, who then had to tow to the pitch due to damage, he's all the way back into 5th place in the pro class. Albeit, it should be pointed out that if he is going to get to the end of this race now, he is going to have to fuel save like nobody else can, because he has yet to pit after what was his initial trip to the pits, but he did spend 5 minutes in the pit lane, so I wonder whether they've perhaps been able to work out a strategy whereby he's able to fuel save for the best part of 55 minutes of racing. As he goes low here versus Nuno Vinagre. He's going to try and pass the elite driver. Will he get it done? Side by side, they make the way in towards the Le Mans chicane. And the answer will be yes. Batica will get up the inside there, nice and smooth. That's how you do it. And as he comes on out, meanwhile, Nathan Anstis is the man trying to chase him down for UKSimRacing niche. The 196 driver at this point in time will need to pass his fellow Porsche Vinagre first. From there, we come back to Matthew Croft. And Croft under a bit of pressure from William Arneson, as Tim Perry has briefly disappeared and then reappeared from what I'm hearing. So he's all okay at the moment, but Perry was the best part of 16 seconds up the road, as Croft goes higher here, lets his fellow Mercedes of Arneson go on the low line and gone past. As they make the way down towards the chicane, well, Croft will just tuck in here, and Sean Connor is approaching very quickly, and right now your eyes do not deceive you. Yes, that gap that was 7 seconds when we last looked at it the best part of 10 minutes ago, it is now down to 1.3 seconds. Sean Connor is flying here right now, and well, as he makes his way on out and up onto the rise, well, I can definitely tell you one thing in that family. They've got all family names that begin with S's right now, and well, what also begins with S is absolute speed. And Connor is showing that here in these wet conditions as he is flying around as we ride on board, looking down over the front of the car. And the Connor Bros McLaren driver right now, I think the confidence is there. And with that confidence, well, he just cannot afford to get too confident. But at this rate, he might be attacking for the win of the pro race before this race is said and done. But he's got to get close first. Oh my goodness, as Sean there finding out what happens when you start to get into that dirty air, and also the fact you're starting to get into the spray. There's even more water being chucked over the front end of the car, and you're losing a little bit of front end downforce, something which this McLaren absolutely needs. It's been designed to run with as much downforce as possible, this car. The British Mark putting together an incredible car with some of the best forward visibility of any GT3 because of the way the front end of the car actually gets buried under the windscreen, which is quite an innovative design. But Sean Connor right now, all he cares about is his best possible visibility looking forward, and what you can tell, he's backing off a lot into these braking zones and through the kink of turn 5, just for the simple reason he's losing sight as he gets this close, but he's got to find a way to overcome it. He's got to find those new grip levels that are constantly evolving, and in doing so, then he might be able to bring this gap down. Croft, if he can keep this gap to a second, he will feel safe, but he won't feel safe if he goes out that wide coming out of turn number 7 and can't get the power down, because that's just giving Connor 4 tenths through that corner, and in the draft of that Mercedes, that's going to make up the delta between the two machines when the Mercedes should be the stronger on the straights. But coming from them, well, there's more unfolding. We've had a bit of an incident for Neville Harris, as we have for none other than Nick Parks, who in the end has had a bit of a spin, albeit we've also got quite a squish nose there for the Ford Mustang driver now. The front bumper has been pushed back, it's receded into the engine bay, albeit not too much, so I think he's still okay, but definitely a little bit of surprise to the system there for the number 35 driver. They'll be hoping that that's the last of his big moments. We'll try and get a replay of it when we can. But whilst all this is going on, what else is happening? Well, Martin Kenyon makes his way past Kyle Roy. Roy, though, I think just had a trip off the road going in towards turn number 6 as he's rejoined. And as he does so, well, the lap down McLaren there of Grant Miller looks to try and find his way to unlap itself. But in the end, Miracle Group M Academy's Kyle Roy gets himself back up to speed. And, well, 4th place right now in the pro class. It won't be the win that we saw at the Sachsenring, but given everything in the way this was played out, I think for Roy, if he finishes inside the top 5 at this point, he'll be grateful enough for that. I think everybody who gets the finish line here, I'm not saying we're allowed to award winners' points to every single driver, but they all deserve it, to be fair, just for surviving these conditions. And indeed, right now, it definitely has proven to be a day here at Daytona today. Well, you can see more water than you can see tarmac. That's how wet it is. I think that's the best way to summarise it. When it gets that heavy, it does get a little bit tricky, but they've all done so incredibly well. But looking back to Parks, he's all over the back of Alexander Vinmark here. Well, I think Vinmark's found his way past, but he's going to fight him either way. And Parks right now looking to come back at him on the run as they make the way around here. Well, the fighting's not over between these two. However, what is definitely over right now is the fact that any sunshine we had has definitely been hidden behind some cloud again. Parks making his way onwards as Vinmark now into 7th in the interclass. He'll be happy with that, the Beta Frost driver. Indeed, Beta Frost enjoying a much stronger race compared to the qualifying session across the board. Vinmark goes a bit deep. Does he keep it together? Not quite. That's going to be a very, very offline there, but somehow he does manage to make sure he puts the pieces together, and in fact Parks there has to back off through the chicane. He's just not got the speed. Into the pit lane, meanwhile, unfortunately, is Bruno Botica. He couldn't quite make the whole distance, so what was looking to be a potential podium finish in the pro class has been relegated to what looks to be potentially a 6th place finish, because the next man after him will be Darren Sharples, but Sharples is a lot further down the road. I don't think there's a risk of the two catching each other. Meanwhile, as we look back to the very front of the field, we still do have Andrea Miato, as it's a big slide for the McLaren in front of him. That is the car of none other than Grant Miller cutting loose. But Miato right now, well, intriguingly, he has pitted, albeit we haven't quite caught it on camera, the same for Richard Simnor, but Miato has come out ahead of Henrik Strand in all of this. Now, has Strand had a bit of an incident to explain it? Yes, he has. It happened a little while back, and that might explain what exactly has happened. Here's a quick replay to explain, ladies and gentlemen, because this is quite telling as to why Miato is your leader. So this was Reece Strand. In fact, he was already behind Miato, so something had gone wrong earlier, and then subsequently a further mistake. He went straight on and into the barrier there for Henrik Riestrand at turn number 7, and well, all the confidence has gone away like that, and that is why Strand has lost out. And Max Wheeler in the end was also ahead at the time. What happened to Wheeler? And well, the answer is we don't exactly know. I think he had to make, well, he just had to make his pit stop in the end, and well, that's how they swap the places back. So we make our way back to your live pictures, ladies and gentlemen, but that explains why Andrea Miato is your leader and not this man who had the contact to the barrier at turn number 7. Still more to come as our drivers make their way into the very closing stages now. We are only 7 minutes from that checkered flag, plus a final lap. And well, in the battle for the pro lead, it is Croft versus Connor still. 3 seconds, the gap has opened itself back up. I think Sean Connor may have just had a bit of a slip and slide on the road. And right now, the McLaren driver here pushed as hard as he might. If he does have to settle for second, given the fact he started 6th in class today and all the way down in 23rd place, I think for Sean Connor, he's got to give himself a pat on the back for this one, because compared to how things started at the Sachsenring, we put together that terrific defensive drive. Well, here today, he has been on the offense in the wet conditions, and if he can put this together in the wet, imagine what he can do in his day on the dry. You can imagine he will definitely be one of the big names in the Pro Championship going forward. It has been a round which has definitely seen him tested, and so far, 6 minutes permitting, he has passed that test with flying colours. But coming back to Nick Parks. Parks still on a mission here, chase down Alexander Wingmark as we ride on board looking down over the engine bay of the number 35 Ford Mustang. And right now Parks still trying to find a way to beat the Beta Frost Porsche, but both drivers there going deep, and Parks right now, it's such a hard position to be in here when you're chasing a car in these conditions. And when we talk about in the drive, the whole hypnosis effect when you're trying to follow the car in front as close as possible to look for a move. But the problem is, the hypnosis effect, essentially what it does is you're starting to look more at the car in front and you copy whatever they do. So if the car in front of you brakes later into the corner, it normally would, you do the same as well. You start to forget about your lines, and well, in the wet, of course, you start doing that here, and that can see you lose so much time. Right now, Parks, what he's got to do, he's got to try and snap himself out of it as the car snatches around. Wingmark goes very sideways through there. Both drivers right now, they're really struggling at the end here. I can imagine the wet tyres they're on are really running out of grip. And as they make their way onto the banking, well, they've gone every step of the distance, these two, in the fight for 6th place in the interclass. But they've got to give just that little bit more to decide who is going to be the first driver outside of the inter top 5. But what a good little battle that's going on between them. And right now, two cars are completely different strengths and weaknesses. You've got the powerhouse of the Mustang of Parks versus what is the pinpoint precision cornering machine of the Porsche of Wingmark. And well, both drivers right now struggling where they should be strong and doing well where they should be weak. But as Parks graces and glides his way between all the curbs there of the Le Mans chicane, almost like a pinball machine in the way, bouncing along and making sure he hits every curb as he goes. And well, right now sliding around here, it's definitely not a strong suit. This Mustang being one of the heaviest GT3s out there based on the balance of performance. I can tell you right now, that number 35 driver, well, in fact, he's keeping it together as well as he has, despite the knocks to the barriers early on. Well, I think he is definitely going to be feeling proud of this one. But back to Tim Perry we come, and he's under some growing pressure in his own Mustang of William Arneson. Arneson getting closer and closer, and Arneson, of course, coming through the field, and I think this is going to be straightforward, at least before they get to turn 1. Arneson gets ahead, Perry goes high and just backs off the throttle, and William Arneson will now move up into 6th place for Beta Frost, and well, onto the brakes he goes, and well, straightforward pass there for Arneson, who's definitely pumping out the laps. He is the fastest driver on circuit. He has been since really about the 19th minute of the race, but unfortunately, due to his very long pit stop to repair the damage to the car and put a full tank of fuel in after what was the incident on lap number 9, it's all going a bit backwards for Arneson, but a recovery drive that's definitely well noted, and I think he'll be pleased with it. Meanwhile, we've also got a bit of fighting going on here between Inters and Pros, and the Pro of Rob Windsor finds himself sandwiched between Robin Powney, who's in front of him, and the car of Daniel Payes that is behind him. And Payes in the BMW will be thinking, how can he get a bit closer and past Windsor for position, so that way he can then go all in for what would be for second place in the interclass. But Windsor right now isn't necessarily going to step aside as Powney tries to hold on. Andre Montini is 23 seconds up the road, so I think the inter leader is safe, albeit I'm not going to say any more about that, because the commentator's curse will probably strike him now that I've said it. Meanwhile, The battle for second in the interclass is well and truly on, but Pays here, well, I think he wants Rob Windsor to make his mind up. Does he get out the way, or does he move forward and annoy Pioneer one more time today? And in the end, Rob Windsor right now, I don't think he's got either option in hand. I think right now he's just trying to keep it together for what is third place in the pro class here, where Martin Kenyon are 15 seconds behind. Well, there's no threat to Pays as such, but he wants that second place. He doesn't want to settle for third, who would, to be fair, when it's right in front of you and you could reach out and theoretically grab it. But that is the challenge right now when you have got drivers of different classes. Just in front of them, we do have Max Wheeler here, who makes his way on past the old duty cars Ford Mustang. And that being the car of Darren Sharples as Pioneer comes up behind it. Small tap there between Sharples and Pioneer. And Sharples goes out wide now, given the small touch. But that is going to give confidence there to Windsor and also to Pays that they might be able to just get a little bit more involved here as they make the way on around. But differences of the speed of the machines here as they head onto the oval. And right now, Sharples staying high. And I think it's going to be his teammate Pays on the radio saying to him, do not come down, I'm coming on through. But we can see that Windsor getting very close to what is the back of Pioneer. No way through as meanwhile Pays goes all in on the brakes down to the chicane. And the old duty cars 88 for all what is his bravado, it's just not going to pay off at the moment. They are staying static. But to the front of the field, here's Andrea Miato then, making his way on to what will be his final lap shortly with 1.5 minutes left. The rain decides to make its ugly head appear one last time. And right now in a game of what is Olympic swimming here at Daytona, well, in the end, he's shown that he can do what is the breaststroke, also what is the front stroke and the back roll. But as he flashes his headlights, he's still got 1 minute to go. And will it be one final masterstroke here for Andrea Miato? Or will Henrik Riestrand, after losing out with that knock to the barrier at turn number 7, can he find 1.5 seconds on the final lap to try and take the lead back? It's going to go the distance, and here we go then, ladies and gentlemen, on to lap number 30 of 30 that we'll see today at Daytona in what has been absolutely miserable conditions. But this has not been a miserable race. It's been absolutely entertaining for all the right reasons, and in some instances as well. But as Rob Windsor battles to Daniel Pays, Pays has got around in there at turn number 4, so Pays has now got one car in front of him. It's the one he needs to beat for second in the interclass of Robin Pioneer. And Rob Windsor, I think in the end, might have just given up that fight, realising the fact it is of zero value. And he just lets it go. He'll be looking to cruise for third place. Oh, goodness me, I thought it was coming in blazing hot there. And there's going to be contact, but not quite so. But right now, they will stay as is. We'll let you know what happens between them as it unfolds. Meanwhile, there's a big spin. That's a, oh, goodness me, Cole Roy going one way then the other. And Strand in the end manages to avoid him. So does Miato. And Strand is closing quickly. He's already got that gap down to 0.8 of a second. And my good lord, that was an absolute nightmare moment there as Colroy went spinning round and round. And, well, Strand right now absolutely galvanised. He's going for it here, but Miato right now, all he's got to do in that Aston Martin is get the power down safely. Surely at this point, it's going to be a drag race to the line. And I wouldn't have believed it, ladies and gentlemen, if you told me before this race got underway today, in these conditions, the top two would be separated by no more than half a second heading towards the Le Mans chicane on the final lap. But here we go as they power their way through. Miato's got to try and get the best possible exit, and Strand looks to hunt him down. Meanwhile, Pioneer and Pays, they're very close together as well. We'll take a look back at that shortly, but right now the leaders, here they come then. And for Strand, well, it's a good run on through, and he really right now is absolutely nailing as he bounces his way over the curb. But has he gone too high? He's lost a bit of traction there. The gap opens up to 0.6, so they power the way along, and right now he's going to keep the throttle pinned. He'll be hoping every step of the way that Miato will have a spin, that he'll run out of fuel, that something will get in his way, but I don't think so, ladies and gentlemen, because they make the way onto the flat for one last time past the pit lane. The checker flag awaits, and for Andrea Miato, he's survived it all. He's come up swinging to the win. Andrea Miato takes victory here in the elite class and overall at Daytona ahead of Henrik Riestrand by half a second. Rhys Saunders, meanwhile, he's got a bit of time to see his finish line, but what a drive from him. He's gone under the radar for most of this, and he will make it 2-4 to the podium in third place at Altitude for him Esports, with Richard Simnor then coming on through. And to bring on home what will be fourth place in the elite class, and the defending champion for DCW Racing, well, he may not have had a happy day in Germany, but he's had a much stronger day today here in the US of A, and I think this might be the trend as it continues as he comes across the line. We've then got a further 14 seconds back to Pietro Antonio Pasquarello, and whilst it's not a 1-2 for the Tartan Res Tech team, I can tell you one thing, given how his race has been up, down and around, he'll be very happy to be inside that top 5, his best result of the season so far. What about William Arneson? When the end, it all came apart in the early stage of the race. But what a recovery drive to 6th in the end, ahead of Tim Perry, who's going to come on through shortly to round off your top 7 for Altitude 3M Esports. But meanwhile, what about the pro class? Well, here he is, Matthew Croft. He survived an altercation in the pits with one of his teammates, but in the end, he takes the pro win by 4 seconds over the man who hounded him, who chased him down. But for Sean Connor, for Connor Bros, it was just too far today. He couldn't quite get it done, but what a second place finish there for the McLaren driver. Andrew Martin, your inter-leader, he's next up, and 10th place overall. Well, that's going to feel special. But for the remaining driver, what's going to feel even more special is a first inter-win of the season for Axis SimSport Z. Well done to him as he crosses the line 9 seconds ahead of Max Wheeler. And then what about the battle for the inter-spots behind? Well, there's Wheeler 11th, and there's your second and third place finishers in the interclass. Robin Pounding in has held on. Daniel Page could not quite get the job done. And behind them, Rob Windsor will round off the pro podium in 14th overall for UKSimRacing International. We've still got a few more drivers to make the way to the end, as we do see a photo opportunity there rising at turn 1. And Martin Kenyon makes his way across the line in 15th place for DXT Motorsports, 4th in the interclass, with a further 11 seconds back to Craig Hewlett. And well, the man who got it wrong, in the end, he's going to get it right this time as he comes into the pits. He's proven to himself at the end of the race. He can't lose out because Casper Brotner has finished a lap down as classified. Hewlett proves he can enter the pit lane safely and not give us a 360 pirouette. But well done to him for 5th place in the interclass, as Matthew Croft there has a distant conversation with Andrew Mantine. I think this is what they used to call texting back in the old days, ladies and gentlemen. I think they're sending hand signals to each other of some description. Well, I think they're conversing on how their races went. But joking aside, as the two Axis SimSport Z cars park up nose to tail here, well, they'll be very happy in the fact that they've both taken class wins. Croft in the pro class, Mantine in the interclass. And my good Lord, what a race it has been here in the US of A. It's been an incredible round, and well, the conditions may not have been appropriate, but I can tell you one thing. It doesn't matter come rain or shine. Our drivers have been absolutely divine. They have delivered, and with that, let's take a look at those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. And as we can see, after an incredible 60 minutes of racing, where you needed more than what was your water armbands in the end in order to survive the conditions here at Daytona, my good Lord, you can see the puddles just spooling there on the tarmac. Well, in the end, it was Andrea Miato for Tautum Restec who brought home that victory in the end by half a second over Hendrik Riestram. The Beta Frost driver in the end, for all the pace he had, a small mistake cost him the lead, and then he didn't have enough time to try and take the place back. Reece Saunders rounded off the podium, overall in elite for Altitude 3M Esports. A further, excuse me, as I'm almost losing my voice now. I think I'm going to take a quick sip of water at that one. Thankfully, we've got plenty in the commentary booth for the amount that's leaked through. But in the end, we saw Reece Saunders, really the best of the rest there, in third place for Altitude 3M Esports. 16 seconds behind, ahead of Richard Simnor for DCW Racing, and that was Pietro Antonio Pasquarello who finished in 5th place. Not quite able to make it a 1-2 for the Tartan Restec team, but the Italian driver in the end, despite his difficulties, making sure he took his first top 5 of the season. William Arneson, a good recovery drive there to 6th place of Beta Frost, ahead of Tim Perry, with the Altitude 3M Esports drive completing the run of the elite drivers in the top 10, and it was the two pros of Matthew Croft for Axis SimSport Z, and he was the best part, 4 seconds ahead of Sean Connor, and the driver from Connor Bros in the end. I think he wanted the win and he definitely pushed for it, but after getting close and finding out the spray and also the dirty air were not going to be conducive to his race, I think the 155 driver opted just to back off and take the podium, knowing there are more results to come this season, given this is only round 2 of 10. Andrew Mantine, well, he took the inter-win. And the Axis SimSport Z driver, a brilliant drive in the end, and really untouchable today. Where many got it wrong, he got it absolutely right. And best dressed 11th was Max Wheeler for Freewheeler Racing by Phoenix. Ruben Paunia took the run-up spot in the interclass with 12th overall for SimCoach, being chased at the end by Daniel Page, the old dudes in cars driver, having all the momentum, but not the time to make the overtake happen. He had to take third in Inter, and just behind was the third place finisher in the pro class there of Rob Windsor for UKSimRacing International, and he does put the UKSR team on the podium there there, and they'll be absolutely pleased with that. So that's your rundown of all the podium finishers overall, and your top 15 was completed by Martin Kenyon for DXT Motorsports, your fourth place Inter finisher. We won't stay for too much longer on the overall results, but what we can see is all your top 15 finished on the lead lap, where Craig Hewlett also finished on the lead lap, but he opted to go to the pit lane as he finished, so that's why he's listed as a lap down, but he never risked losing 16th place or 5th in the interclass ahead of Casper Brotner, Nuno Vinagre, Nathan Anstis and Nick Parks. And credit where it's due to both Nathan Anstis and Nick Parks for delivering very strong performances in very treacherous conditions. Outside that top 20, we did see the theme of what was a lap down continue with Bruno Batica and also Alexander Vingmark, Thomas Barjut, Steve Hobbs, Darren Sharples and Jakob Stofko. And behind the Mirko Group M Esports strider, it was 2 laps down for many, including Gilles Lequy, who put on a great show, to be fair, to take 9th in the interclass. Some good points for him, more on that shortly. He was the head of logistical nightmare racing machine of David Young, and we also saw 2 laps down to Alex Brown and Kyle Roy. That theme continued all the way through to none other than 31st place of Grant Miller, the Phoenix Racing driver, ahead of his teammate Shane Cotton, who was 3 laps down at the close, as was Andrew Fellows and Ross Young, and it was 4 laps down to Tom Wheeler, with Neville Harris being your last finisher of this race in 36th place. They're 7 laps down. Sadly, it was retirements from the race for none other than Shane Connor and for Adam Hedgecock, Harry Shaw and Hayden Miller, all of them looking strong at certain points in the race, perhaps none more so than Harry Shaw, who was running second, chasing the leader of the pro class before his demise in the race and his meeting with the wall. Hayden Miller the same, chasing down the top 3. It all went wrong again. Technical retirement in round number 1, and here today the wet weather seeing his race come undone for Phoenix Racing. Outside the top 40, we also had retirements for Harvey Wheeler and for Adam Waters, Richard Jones, Robin Aston, and sadly, I do believe it was a non-start for James Conley for UKSimRacing Herbert with a problem with the Ferrari, and in the end the number 46 car just not able to get going. But as for the class finishing positions, we start off with the elite class, and here we can see in the top of our 3 classes, well, it was a top mark performance at Andrea Miato for Tartan ResTech, whereas everybody else made a mistake today. The Italian driver refused to make an error, and that's how he took the win. He was half a second ahead of Betafrost Henrik Strand, with Reece Saunders completing the top 3 for Altitude 3M Esports, and Richard Simnell for DCW Racing enjoying a quiet race to 4th place, knowing that in the end, no mistakes is all he could afford. Pietro Antonio Pasquarello took 5th there for Tartan ResTech. That's part of what was 8 seconds ahead of William Arneson. The Betafrost driver was early instant, where he got the car into the pits, got it repaired, and came all the way from the back to a 6th place finish. So some good points there. And indeed, he has the confidence now that he can use this as part of his championship scores, or he can add it as a drop score at the end of the season. Tim Perry took 7th for Altitude 3M Esports in a solid drive ahead of Max Wheeler. And the three-wheeler racing by Phoenix Audi driver looking so strong in the early stages, but unfortunately Audi biting back in the latter half of the race and costing him the podium finish. It was a lap down to Casper Brotner, as it was to Nuno Vinagre, and behind the privateer, Jakob Stofko was best dressed in 11th, ahead of your retirees of Hayden Miller and Harvey Wheeler. Then coming on to the pro class, we'll hear the story in the pros was one where Matthew Croft was the man who won, but he didn't have it all his own way, with the Axis Sport Z drive being closed down by the Connor Bros McLaren of Sean Connor, but the Mercedes was able to come home triumph, knowing that he was not going to be the car that had to deal with all the spray in the wet weather. Rob Wins in the end settled for 3rd for UKSimRacing International, not able to stay with the top 2, but able to stay well clear of the rest, but it was a 3rd of the fall for the team, because Nathan Anstis, his teammate, finished behind him a lap down, head of the privateer Bruno Batica, and credit where it's due to Bruno, because he put it on pole in 5th place overall, and after that lap 2 incident at turn number 1, well, many may have retired at that point, but he towed to the pit, got the car repaired, and did a brilliant job on strategy to make his way back to 5th place. We thought he might have the fuel to get to the end by having pitted so early, essentially, but not quite so, but still a top 5. It goes to show you, it's not about how you start the race, it's about how you commit to the finish. Steve Hobbs was 6th for Sim Coach, just ahead of Darren Sharples, with the Ferrari driver making sure that Sharples couldn't quite get close in the end in their rendition of Ford versus Ferrari, and the old dudes in cars machine finishing ahead of Kyle Roy from Mirko Group M Academy, who in the end had his late spin at what was the run out of the kink, and well, a big surprise there, but thankfully nobody, including Roy, being harmed in that one. He was 2 laps down to the 3 laps down of Ross Young for DXT Motorsports, and then Adam Hedgecock and Harry Shaw sadly were retirees, and they completed the pro order. Behind them, in the interclass, there were some star drives here as well, with Andrew Montine really being the star of the show at the very front, and in the end not putting the foot wrong compared to his peers, and the Axis Sport Z driver finished 9.5 seconds ahead of Robin Pownier. Pownier, to be fair, did an absolutely brilliant job there to make sure that Daniel Pace could get close, but could never quite touch 2nd place. The gap between the two of them half a second at the finish line, with the old dudes in cars driver putting on a late spurter pace to finish on the podium. Martin Kenyon finished 4th for DXT Motorsports, in what was quite an understated drive for the Lamborghini drive. We didn't really get to talk too much about it today, but he was a lap ahead as classified of Craig Hewlett, your winner from round number 1. But today for the Access Sim Sport Wide driver, he'll be ruining what could have been when he made his way into the pits and had that spin, as otherwise he definitely would have been in contention for what was either 2nd or 3rd. Still, it was the 5th for him, ahead of Nick Parks, the privateer, who no matter how many times his Ford got bruised or battered, he stayed in it to win it and finished 6th ahead of Alexander Vingmark, the Beta Frost driver, in the end not quite able to hold back the pace of Parks, but making sure to stay ahead of the Ferrari of Thomas Barjuk. Jules Leckie finished in 9th place ahead of David Young, who rounded off your top 10 for Logistical Nightmare Racing. He was 2 laps down behind Leckie, as was SAS Racing's Alex Brown, and it was 2 laps down as well for Grant Miller for Phoenix Racing ahead of teammate Shane Cotton, with your top 15 completed by Andrew Fellows and Tom Wheeler. It was then Neville Harrison 16th, and he was your last finisher, with retirement sadly for Connor Bros' Shane Connor, as it was for Team Nubish's Adam Waters, and we also saw retirements for Richard Jones, Robin Aston, and lastly, of course, the non-start for James Connolly for UKSimRacing Herbert. So that concludes our rundown of the results, ladies and gentlemen, subject to any stewards' inquiries. But with that, as our circuit has definitely fallen silent, it is time for us to wrap up. And if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know how you can get on the grid at SimRacing International and take part in this series or any of our series that we run on a weekly basis, well, for all that and more, we definitely recommend you join our official Discord. Invite link at the bottom of your screen. There's never been a better time to get on the grid at SimRacing International, and whether you're a Norris all the way through to an esports pro or even a real-life professional racing driver, there's a place for you on the grid here. And in terms of joining the grid, well, we do have multiple GT3 series. Of course, you've been tuning in today to the UK SimRacing Community Sunday GT3 series. But if you're more of a weekday racer, perhaps you want to go racing straight after work or after school, well, we do have our Thursday evening GT3 Championship that's currently in its 11th season, and it's running 2 splits with 120 drivers. Alternatively, if you're a GT fan, but you want to go back in time a little bit and enjoy the GTEs when they were in their prime, well, of course, we do have the cars in 2023, and they occupy our Friday evening series, and we've got our first season of that underway in the GTE Championship, and that's kept us guessing every step of the way. Alternatively, if you're looking for something a lot more casual, perhaps you just want to find your feet on the grid, well, of course, we do have our Practice League, which does run on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, so there's never been a better opportunity to get on the grid with us here at SimRacing International, and you definitely have a place with us here. Don't worry about it, because you will never find a more friendly community other than SRI. But also, we'd like to take a moment to say a big thank you and to our series and league sponsors, including CarMate, More Than Technology, and also the GP2 group. And on top of that as well, we'd like to say a huge thank you to Motorsport UK's esports division for continuing to recognise us here at SimRacing International as a recommended community, and long may our relationship with Motorsport UK's esports division continue throughout 2026. But ladies and gentlemen, we now turn our attentions to next time, and after the water-logged slog of Daytona, well, hopefully, we're going to be getting some Portuguese sunshine next time, because it's off to the Autodroma International do Algarve, also known as Portimao Circuit, for round number 3. So all the racing there will occur on Sunday, the 25th of January, 2026. But come join us as if it were live on Monday, the 26th of January, where we can promise you won't see as much rain, but you'll definitely still see plenty of battling action and even more drama, as Portugal always delivers, there's no doubt about it. But until then, this has been round number 2 of the Sunday GT3 Championship, brought to you by UKSimRacing and SimRacing International. We have seen new names rise to the top of the standings. Will we see even more new names rise to the top in round 3? We'll see then. But we've been SimRacing International. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh. This has been a Paul Walsh production. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.